Chapter 1021. The last Ramu died after being attacked by the two goddesses. Ishtar, who couldn't find a target, stopped shooting, and Quizzard, who also couldn't find a target, returned to the back of her pterosaur. At this moment, everyone flew side by side. I'm in a good mood, that's right. The two goddesses smiled like goddesses. Gudatsi and Matthew couldn't connect the two goddesses at this moment with the previous two. Gudatsi simply changed the topic. I don't know how Assassin is doing. While talking, Gudatsi showed a trace of worry. After all, the 6 magical beasts were difficult to deal with for Ishtar and Quizzard, so it was natural for Gudatsi to be worried. Senpai, I believe that Senpai Villo will be fine. After all, he has always been very reliable. Matthew clenched his small fist and nodded to Gudatsi. In this regard, Ishtar also agreed. Matthew is right. That guy won't do anything that he isn't sure of. Since he chose to deal with the 6 magical beasts, he must have his reasons. Since Ishtar said so, I think Hyunryong will be fine. But I didn't expect you to have so much confidence in Hyunryo. Then, Quizzard also interjected, but her tone was quite mocking. Humph, I don't have confidence in him. But, if Hyunryong can be defeated so easily, I won't be unable to defeat him for so long in the past. Ishtar crossed her arms and looked proud. Everyone, now is not the time to quarrel. Nuakamaru said something, but her face was a little ugly. Similarly, Musasobo Benkei, who was still silent, also looked a little ugly. We probably have a problem. At this time, Merlin, who was on the back of the pterosaur next to Gudatsi, suddenly pointed to the front. His expression was a little ugly. There was no other reason than the place Merlin had pointed to. Gudatsi and others looked at the place where Merlin pointed. It was dark. The clouds in the sky gradually turned into dark clouds, and the sky gradually turned scarlet. Under the alternating black and red sky, the Indian Ocean connected to the Persian Gulf was dark. No, it wasn't the Indian Ocean, it was the black mud. The black mud connected the sky and the sea, not metaphorically, but a real connection. In front of everyone, from the surface of the sea to the black clouds in the sky, it was as if a wall of black mud had formed. All they could see was black mud and nothing else. In a sense, the water and the sky was black. Because the surrounding environment had been turning dark, and Gudatsi and others' attention was attracted by Ishtar and Quizzard, they didn't notice this scene. The black mud that formed the water and the sky was faintly creeping. Anyway, in Gudatsi's opinion, it was quite disgusting. She now understood why Merlin frowned. After discovering this situation, Quizzard had already stopped the pterosaurs and even faintly retreated. Then, Roman's panicked voice came from Gudatsi's bracelet. Quizzard, retreat quickly? At that moment, Quizzard didn't care whether Roman's words were correct or not. She immediately waved her hand, and the pterosaurs made a sharp turn and flew backward. Gudatsi, who didn't react for a moment, even fell on Matthew due to inertia. Sitting up again, Gudatsi looked at her bracelet in confusion. Doctor, what's wrong? That's right, they only saw the black mud that was the same color as the sky, and there was still some distance between them. Why were they in such a hurry to leave? It was as if the danger was already near them. I don't know what you saw. Chaldea can't receive the image since you went deep into the Indian Ocean, but fortunately, the instrument is still working as usual. Roman, who was in Chaldea, wiped the sweat on his forehead that appeared out of nowhere and answered Gudatsi word by word. The instrument detected that there was a huge amount of magic everywhere around you just now. No, to be precise, you are in a space full of huge magic and your surroundings are still like this. To make an analogy, you can imagine that you are in the Holy Grail. Although the tone was also very serious, even at a critical moment, Leonardo da Vinci still didn't forget to joke. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci's words made everyone recover from the shock, and then they were shocked again. What they realized was that the magic that was being emitted was probably the black mud around them. And the shock was easier to understand. Look carefully. The distance around us seems to be dark. Ishtar frowned. The pterosaur had been flying behind them, but they didn't seem to have moved at all. If that's the case, Gudatsi's eyes widened. In the end, Quizzard said a guess that was likely to be the truth. Maybe we have entered a special space like what Leonardo da Vinci said. They were shocked because they seemed to be trapped. On the coast of the Persian Gulf, Wu Ming, holding the holy sword, stood on a huge red-haired monster that looked like a wolf or a dog burning with holy flames. The reddish-yellow flames and the color of the monster reflected on Wu Ming, who was standing on top and looked particularly sacred. After confirming that the body under him was cold, Wu Ming raised his hand and waved. The sword of salvation released a ray of light and shone on the body. In an instant, the flame transformed by the sun suddenly burned. He was going to use the flame to burn the body of the demonic beast. Every time Wu Ming killed a demonic beast, he would use various means to destroy the body to prevent them from suddenly resurrecting. Then, Wu Ming could not help but look at the direction where Gadotsi and the others left. It has been so long. Why hasn't Ishtar activated her noble phantasm? There was still a connection between Ishtar and Wu Ming. Once Ishtar activated her noble phantasm, Wu Ming could easily feel it. Wu Ming, who felt that something was not right, was a little uneasy. It seems that there is no time to deal with the remaining 2 demonic beasts. That's right, Wu Ming did not kill the 6 demonic beasts. After Wu Ming killed Ramu, he successively killed Baxiumu, Mdabrutu, and Ulidim. Only Musamafu and Kururu were left. Kururu could fly, which meant that it was more agile than Baxiumu and the rest. Musamafu, on the other hand, was cunning and cherished his life. After Wu Ming killed Basumu, he hid in the sea of black mud. Even if he attacked Wu Ming, he would only feign an attack as a cover. After that, he would immediately dive into the depths of the sea of black mud, allowing Umudabirutu, Ulidim, and Kurulu to take charge of the main attacks. After killing Mdabrutu, the remaining 2 demonic beasts, Kururu and Ulidim, panicked. The body under Wu Ming that was about to burn out was Ulidim's. Chapter 1022. Wu Ming took advantage of the moment when Ulidim and Kururu were in a panic and captured Ulidim in one fell swoop. After fighting for a while, he directly used the Sun incarnation as his trump card to kill Ulidim. But unfortunately, Kururu also took the opportunity to sneak into the sea of black mud, and Musamafu no longer appeared after Wu Ming killed Mdablutu. It was estimated that Musamafu had sneaked into a deeper place. At this moment, the sea of black mud still had some influence on Wu Ming, so Wu Ming couldn't go deep into the sea of black mud to find Musamafu and Kururu. In addition, Wu Ming noticed that something was wrong with Gadotsi, so he decided to let the 2 monsters go for the time being. He was going to see what happened to Gadotsi and Kururu first. However, at this moment something unexpected happened to Wu Ming. The black-purple portal that was under his control suddenly opened automatically beside him. This made Wu Ming shocked and puzzled. Wu Ming learned this move from the game system when he transmigrated to another world. In other words, the portal was a unique move. Wu Ming also taught Demetrius the move system of Yggdrasil, but because Demetrius was a servant, Wu Ming couldn't be sure whether Demetrius had mastered the magic system of Yggdrasil. However, even if Demetrius had mastered it, she also promised Wu Ming that she wouldn't spread it out. So who opened the portal that appeared in front of Wu Ming? In the next second, Wu Ming got the answer. Brother Wu Ming? A delicate and excited voice came out from the portal. And then, a black-haired, white-robed figure rushed into Wu Ming's arms from the portal. Wu Ming instantly understood who came and hugged the person in his arms and rubbed her little head. The person who came was naturally Wu Ming's cute sister, Shitsuki Meiyu. Meiyu? Why are you here? Wu Ming was both puzzled and shocked. This was a singularity, and it was Mesopotamia in BC. Meiyu couldn't have come here. As for whether it was true or not, when Meiyu shouted Brother Wu Ming knew that the Meiyu in his arms was not someone else. It was Brother Wu Ming's power that brought me here. Meiyu's cheeks were slightly red because of Wu Ming's touch, but she still enjoyed it, like a kitten. When Meiyu said this, Wu Ming suddenly realized that he did give his power to Meiyu. After Wu Ming got rid of Darius, the world of Meiyu and Ilya was safe. After that, Wu Ming left that world and used the black mud to find Gydia. When he left, Wu-Ming asked the young Gilgamesh to give Meiyu the rank card with his power. It was a golden caster, magician, rank card. Although the crisis in Wu-Ming's world had been solved by Wu-Ming, and Meiyu would not have any trouble, Wu-Ming still left his power to Meiyu just in case. After that, because of a series of involuntary things, Wu-Ming was a little busy. During this time, he did not go back to see Meiyu. Wu-Ming also gradually forgot that he gave Meiyu the rank card. My rank card suddenly became hot, and then I felt the summoning from the rank card. I thought it was Brother Wu-Ming calling me, so I responded to the summoning. As a result, I appeared next to the blonde Rin and Osaka. God knows what Meiyo's expression was when she saw the blonde Rin and Osaka with Wu-Ming's aura. Anyway, Meiyu only remembered that she was completely dumbfounded at the time. When Meiyu said this, Wu-Ming understood everything. It was probably because Ereshkigal created a chain of summoning when she merged with Wu-Ming's divinity. She inadvertently contacted Meiyu, who held Wu-Ming's rank card, and Meiyu thought it was Wu-Ming calling her. As a result, she came over in a daze. At this moment, Meiyu was a servant's body composed of a rank card and a spirit core, which was somewhat similar to Little Black. Little Black had already installed a magic converter in her body, and now she didn't need to rely on others to replenish her mana. But after all, she still had the body of a servant, unlike the body of an ordinary primary school student like Ilya and Meiyu. In the past, Wu-Ming didn't have any means. Now, Wu-Ming could use the power of the source to create a puppet body for Little Black that was 100% similar to the body of a primary school student. Meiyo's human body should still be in her world. Even if something happened to Meiyu in Wu-Ming's arms, it wouldn't affect Meiyo's body. At most, it would cause the rank card to be scrapped. However, Wu-Ming wouldn't let anything happen to Meiyu. And the other party isn't Rin and Osaka. She just borrowed Rin and Osaka's appearance. Remember to call her sister L. Wu-Ming knocked Meiyo's little head. I know, Brother Wu-Ming. Don't knock my head all the time. Wu-Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He rubbed Meiyo's little head again, comforting Meiyo's depression of being knocked on the head. You said you appeared next to Ereshkigal. How is Ereshkigal now? Wu-Ming was quite worried about Ereshkigal. Blonde-haired Rin and Osaka, Sister L, is now dealing with the demonic beasts in Uruk. She asked me to come and find Brother Wu-Ming to see if there's anything I can help with. However, Wu-Ming had a strange expression. Are you sure Ereshkigal didn't ask you to come and find me to save the day? Wu-Ming almost said this sentence. Can Ereshkigal defeat those 5 demonic beasts? Although Wu-Ming asked cautiously, there was still distrust in his words. Couldn't be helped. Quizzard and Ishtar would have a problem surviving against any one of the demonic beasts. How could Ereshkigal defeat 5 demonic beasts? Meiyu pouted and was a little dissatisfied. Brother Wu-Ming, don't underestimate Sister L. She directly locked the 5 demonic beasts in the underworld. Immediately, Meiyu described the whole process of the 5 demonic beasts attacking the Uruk. When the sea of black mud rushed to the Uruk, Meiyu cast the servant in the class card, which was Wu-Ming's ability, Yggdrasil System's magic. She raised the ground and intercepted the sea of black mud. After that, Ereshkigal, who received Wu-Ming's divinity, got rid of the restrictions of the underworld and came to the ground. However, Ereshkigal still had a trace of her own divinity, so the underworld still protected Ereshkigal. She successfully launched her underworld authority and locked the 5 demonic beasts in her own underworld. In the underworld, Ereshkigal could be said to be invincible. The 5 demonic beasts were lambs waiting to be slaughtered. However, Wu-Ming was not optimistic about Ereshkigal. After all, these demonic beasts emerged from the sea of black mud, and the essence of the sea of black mud was the black mud, which was the same as Wu-Ming's. Since the 5 demonic beasts were likely not to be suppressed by the underworld, Ereshkigal was in danger. Chapter 10:23. Wu-Ming waved his hand, and a clay tablet unique to Uruk appeared in his hand. The clay tablet was covered with Lune runes, and these runes stored the words that Wu-Ming wanted to say. Meiyu, immediately bring this to Gilgamesh and then look for Ereshkigal. Those demonic beasts are not ordinary demonic beasts, and I'm worried that she might have an accident. After Wuming finished speaking, he handed the clay tablet to Meiyu. I understand, Brother Wuming. Meiyu nodded with a serious expression. Meiyu, who had Wuming's class card, was equivalent to Wuming in the state of caster, magician. Her magic power was almost infinite, and she had mastered Loon magic and Yggdrasil magic. She also had a huge amount of divinity and a dragon's breath, and some of Wuming's noble artifacts. Not to mention fighting against enemies, she had no problem protecting herself. In addition, Meiyu was a serious and strict child, so Wuming was very relieved to let Meiyu handle this matter. What is Brother Wuming going to do? Meiyu asked abruptly, and she seemed a little nervous. Knowing that Meiyu was worried about his Wuming could not help but smile, and then he put his hand on Meiyu's head. Don't worry, I'm just going to solve a small problem. After this matter is over, don't be in a hurry to go back. Stay in Uruk and I'll make omelet rice for you alone. That's right, Wuming was going to give Meiyu special treatment. Although Meiyu was a little embarrassed to leave Ilya and Little Black to eat alone, when she thought that she could have Wuming to herself, Meiyu was secretly delighted. Well, I'm waiting for Brother Wuming to make omelet rice for me in Uruk. After saying that with a blush on her cheeks, Meiyu opened the portal and went in. In this regard, Wuming showed a warm expression. Sure enough, Meiyu has always been very sensible. It was not the matter of making omelet rice for Meiyu. Wuming's sensible was that Meiyu did not ask much. Anyone could tell that the situation was not good just by looking around. Although it was not a certain death, the dark doomsday scene of the sky and sea was still very unsettling. However, Meiyu did not ask anything. She did not ask what was going on here, nor did she ask why Wuming said anything. She only listened to her brother's words, listened to Wuming's words, and did what Wuming told her to do. She was completely like an obedient sister who listened to her brother's words. Or perhaps this was Meiyu's mature side. If it were Little Black, he might not be as good as Meiyu. If it were Ilya, it would definitely be worse. Ilya would most likely get to the bottom of it. If she did not do that, Ilya would definitely be distracted or absent-minded. As if imagining Ilya's embarrassed look, Wuming could not help but smile. For the sake of Beauty Tour, for the sake of Ilya and Blackie who aren't here, I have to work harder. After Wuming finished speaking, he landed on the black mud sea and sat on the surface of the sea. First of all, I need to confirm whether Gadotsi and the others are safe. As Wuming said, he raised his arm and turned the back of his hand to himself. Some red marks were clearly visible on the back of Wuming's hand, which was the magic power crystal of Ishtar's command spell that had been used up before. Although it was said to be a command spell, it did not have most of the effects of a command spell. It only had the effect of replenishing the magic power of the servant. Moreover, after these command spells were used up, they could be replenished through the magic power in the body. But they had not been used, so Wuming did not replenish them. And now it was the time to use them. Wuming's raised hand suddenly clenched into a fist. The originally sparse red marks on the back of his hand suddenly solidified, forming 3 scarlet command seals that resembled a bow and arrow, yet also resembled a pair of wings. Wuming replenished his magic power. After that, Wuming began to issue orders to Ishtar. By the command curse, O goddess of fertility and war, restore your magic power to full. By command spell, mistress of heaven, restore your magic power. By the command of the curse, Ishtar, release your noble phantoms and break through the predicament. That's right, Wuming used all the command spells in one breath. Although there were 3 command spells, their function was only to replenish Ishtar's magic power. The first command was to replenish Ishtar's magic power. The second command was to make Ishtar's body overflow with magic power. The third command was to make Ishtar's magic power so much that it was completely out of control, to the extent that it would cause a big explosion if left alone. In this way, the effect of Ishtar's noble phantoms would be several times the original or even more than 10 times. After all, this was not a game. Doubling was not just multiplying by 2, and multiplying by several times was not just multiplying by several. In this way, Wuming believed that Ishtar's noble phantoms would be able to affect the surrounding environment. With this, Wuming would be able to find them. Sure enough, A few seconds after Wu Ming gave the 3 orders, a light that resembled a falling star appeared in a certain direction. Then, there was a big explosion. On Gudatzi's side, after the big explosion caused by Ishtar's noble phantoms, Matthew put away his noble phantoms, revealing a few pterosaurs and a few people on their backs. Just now, everyone was still thinking of a way to get out, but Ishtar suddenly panicked and shouted for Hyun-Ryong. Then, she released her noble phantoms that seemed to be many times stronger. After Ishtar's attack was released from Anna's horse, Matthew also activated his noble phantoms and successfully blocked in front of everyone, blocking the aftershock. TSK, TSK, TSK. Ishtar is indeed powerful. She can release such a powerful attack. Merlin sighed as he watched from the side. He did not care about what Ishtar, who was lying on Gudatzi's pterosaur, was thinking. Damn it, Hyun-Ryong. Ishtar wanted to look ferocious, but she was too tired to do so. She even stuttered when she spoke. Ms. Ishtar, are you all right? Matthew looked at Ishtar with concern. However, Gudatzi interrupted. Matthew, you blocked the big explosion just now. Are you hurt? Matthew shook his head. I'm fine, Senior. Ms. Ishtar's noble phantoms were launched far away. I only blocked the aftershock. But just the aftershock alone scared me. Quizzard was the one who spoke now. I didn't expect Ishtar to release such a powerful attack. If there were levels, Ishtar's attack could be categorized as EX. It's all virtuous. Dragon. That guy. Ugh. Ishtar tilted her head and stopped talking. She was so tired that she couldn't take it anymore. Ishtar's body almost exploded after 3 times of mana replenishment. If Ishtar did not release her noble phantoms quickly, Gudatzi and the rest would have been dead by now. Even after releasing her noble phantoms, Ishtar did not feel good. She was still weak. Therefore, it was not unreasonable for Ishtar to gnash his teeth at Wu Ming. Chapter 1024. His Excellency Hyun-Ryong must be looking for us, Musasobo Benkei said. It could only be said that Wu Ming was worthy of the existence of the new army. Not only did Wu Ming understand, but Nyo Ruowan also understood Wu Ming's intention early on. His Excellency Hyun-Ryong is right. If not, we wouldn't have found the exit. Following Nuakamaru's gaze, a gap appeared in front of them. Unlike the other places, light shone through the gap. They were indeed trapped, but Ishtar's noble phantasm forcefully blasted a hole in the black mud. Not only did Wu Ming get them out of danger, but he could also tell Wu Ming where they were. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Even Ishtar could only keep her dissatisfaction to herself. It was precisely because Wu Ming's action was correct that Ishtar, who did not have the moral high ground, could not find trouble with Wu Ming afterwards. Although she was the mistress of the sky, Ishtar, who had suffered a lot in the hands of Wu Ming, understood one thing. If she were to find trouble with Wu Ming, she could still save some face. However, if she were to find trouble with Wu Ming, she would definitely be tricked by Wu Ming, just like when she was in the underworld. Let's hurry up and leave, Gudatzi suggested. If there were any accidents later, they would be in trouble. However, that was how trouble would come about. Suddenly, the entire space began to shake. Whether it was the sky, the sea, or even the walls that connected the sky and the sea, everything shook and a black substance began to fall. The sharp-eyed Quizzer was able to immediately tell that the black substance was black mud. Quizzard immediately ordered the pterosaurs. Quick, pterosaurs, head there at full speed. A few pterosaurs flew in the direction of the gap. They were so fast that Gudatzi had to hold on tightly to their backs. However, the black mud was falling faster and faster. Gradually, the entire space looked like it was raining black mud. The raindrops were the size of a fist. Fortunately, the gap between the raindrops was large and it was not a rainstorm yet. Therefore, they could continue to fly over on the pterosaurs. However, because the pterosaur was jumping up and down and swaying left and right to avoid the rain of black mud, Gudatzi almost couldn't catch it. Fortunately, Mashu was there to help Gudatzi. She didn't let Gudatzi fall down, nor did she let Gudatzi touch the black mud. However, Everyone could see that the raindrops were getting bigger and denser. At this moment, the pterosaurs were still halfway to the exit. Although everyone knew that they could not touch the black mud, Quizzard could not help but say, "Everyone, don't get touched by the black mud." However, now that the volume and frequency of the raindrops had increased, it was too difficult to not get stained by the black mud. The first accident happened. Gah! The pterosaur that Nuakamaru and Musasobo Benkei were riding on was dripped by a drop of the black mud and let out a scream. Then, the entire pterosaur flew around uncontrollably and even collided with several drops of rain. "Lady Nuakamaru? Don't worry about me, Mi-Ching." Nuakamaru and Musasobo Benkei's panicked voices came from the pterosaur. "Lady Nuakamaru? Mr. Mi-Ching?" Matthew shouted nervously. Whoosh! Suddenly, countless petals flew to Nuakamaru and Musasobo Benkei's pterosaur. It was as if the pterosaur was frozen in place and became quiet. The rain that fell from the sky seemed to have encountered some resistance and was blocked by the petals. In the next second, Merlin flew over on the pterosaur while Musasobo Benkei and Nuakamaru took the opportunity to jump onto Merlin's pterosaur. Piedra del Sol. The Quetzalcoatl god had released the real phantasm of the Piedra Almanac that was originally in the Temple of Eridu. Although Eric Metropolis was drowned by the sea of black mud, the Piedra god had summoned the Piedra Almanac to her side before Eric Metropolis was drowned. As for the size, it was Quizzard's phantasm and could be changed at will. Flames and lava emerged from a fiery red stone in Quizzard's hand and formed a semicircular protective shield. Quizzard raised it above her head. "Everyone, come to my side." The protective shield of flames and lava blocked the rain above Quizzard's head and was wide enough to protect the others. The pterosaur that Gudatsi and the others were riding on immediately flew over. Everyone immediately flew toward the gap without stopping. After all, it was better to leave as soon as possible. The pterosaur that was stained by the rain fell into the darkness below as if it had died. After they were safe, Musasobo Benkei took the lead to ask about Nuakamaru's safety. "Lady Nuakamaru, are you okay?" Nuakamaru half knelt on the pterosaur's back and shook his head to show that he was fine. "Di-Ching, no, Ocean Lord, it's all thanks to you this time." Nuakamaru knew that she was almost stained by the black mud. Although it was just a little bit of black mud, who knew how the black mud eroded? Was it instant assimilation? Or did it need time? No one knew and no one would try. "What are you talking about, Nuakamaru? As long as you're okay." Musasobo Benkei, who was half kneeling on the pterosaur's back, lowered his head silently as if he was dead. This gave Nuakamaru a shock. Similarly, Gudatsi and Matthew, who were on the pterosaur's back, were also shocked. "Mr. Di-Ching. Di-Ching." Quizzard, who was using her noble artifact, and Ishtar, who was exhausted, did not have time to care. However, Merlin, who was riding on the same pterosaur as Musasobo Benkei and Nuakamaru, seemed to have noticed something and squinted his eyes. However, Musasobo Benkei lowered his head and spoke. "Lady Nuakamaru, I have something to ask of you." Hearing Musasobo Benkei's voice, Nuakamaru was relieved. "What's the matter?" As long as he was not dead, everything was fine. "Can I ask you to die?" After Musasobo Benkei finished speaking, he instantly got up and slashed at Nuakamaru with his Bicento. "What?" Gudatsi and Matthew widened their eyes when they saw this scene. They could not react at all. Not only them, but even Nuakamaru could not react. After all, Nuakamaru did not expect Musasobo Benkei to assassinate him. This was not a dereliction of duty as a general on the battlefield. Instead, it was natural for him to lower his guard around someone close to him. However, the attack was still blocked. Clank! The holy sword that looked like an authentic item blocked the sharp-she blade, making a piercing sound. The one who blocked the attack was naturally Merlin, who was next to Nuakamaru. He had just noticed that something was wrong with Musasobo Benkei. "Sure enough, you have been assimilated by the black mud." Chapter 1025. Following Merlin's words, Everyone looked at Musasobo Benkei, who was holding his Bicento and preparing to slash. Musasobo Benkei's skin was originally the color of a dead person, and his thick eyelids were not something a normal person could have. But at this moment, Musasobo Benkei did not look like a normal person. Black lines could be vaguely seen on Musasobo Benkei's skin like tattoos, and a chaotic aura filled Musasobo Benkei's body. And at the back of Musasobo Benkei's neck, there was an obvious black mark. It was the mark of the black mud after it dried up. There was no doubt that he had been stained by the black mud when the pterosaur lost control. I didn't expect the black mud to be able to assimilate instantly. Merlin frowned, then used his sword to lift Musasobo Benkei's Bicento, then stabbed at Musasobo Benkei. However, Musasobo Benkei jumped off the pterosaur's back and stood on something black, bathing in the rain of black mud. It was a pterosaur, a black pterosaur. It was the pterosaur that had fallen below and was eroded by the black mud. This is really surprising. I didn't expect Sir Merlin's swordsmanship to be so outstanding. Merlin's move was not easy to block, so Musasobo Benkei chose to retreat. "Senior, please be careful." Matthew, who reacted at this moment, immediately held his shield in front of Gadotsi and Ishtar, and looked warily at Musasobo Benkei, who was standing on the black pterosaur. Quizzard knew what had happened, but she did not move and maintained her lava shield. However, the pterosaurs collectively sped up again. They had to leave the range of the rain of black mud first, or they would be in an extremely disadvantageous situation no matter what they did. Musasobo Benkei went from the pterosaur lost control due to the black mud to assassinating Nuakamaru in less than 10 seconds. There was no doubt that he had been assimilated by the black mud or Tiamat's authority in these 10 seconds or even shorter. To be honest, this assimilation speed scared Quizzard. How could there be such an exaggerated ability in this world? Quizzard did not know that Tiamat's ability was most likely strengthened by the black mud, so she could only be amazed. He wasn't sure if the assimilation speed had anything to do with one's strength, but he was afraid that he would be done for once he was infected. Therefore, he had to leave the range of the rain of black mud. However, the black pterosaur at the same speed at the same time, the pterosaur was not far behind Nuakamaru's. At this moment, Nyo Ruwan spoke. When Nuakamaru's state of mind was unusually good. She did not break down because of Musasobo Benkei's assimilation. Instead, she talked to him very calmly. Merlin silently took a few steps back, leaving space for Musasobo Benkei and Nuakamaru to talk. The moment I asked you about your situation, I felt the existence of Mother. That is the supreme truth, the true Buddhist kingdom that saves all living beings from suffering. When he said this, Musasobo Benkei was clearly a little excited. No, it should be crazy. Lord Nuakamaru, I want you to return to Mother's embrace with them, and you should be in front of them. Unfortunately, you were stopped by Sir Merlin. As if he had really missed something important, Musasobo Benkei shook his head regretfully. Stay here and let this penniless monk send you to see Mother. With that, Musasobo Benkei raised his hand and grasped at the gap. Countless black mud filled the gap. The gap began to heal quickly. At this moment, Musasobo Benkei could actually control the black mud? This gave everyone a fright. It was not easy to open a gap in this black mud space. Once it closed, who knew how to get out? It was hard to say whether Wuming could find them again. Everyone, come to my side. Quizzer called out to the crowd. Merlin was the first to jump onto Quizzard's pterosaur. Then, Nuakamaru jumped onto Gadotsi and came to Quizzard's side with Matthew, who was carrying Ishtar. Feathered serpent god pterosaur, full speed ahead. Quizzard's pterosaur that everyone was riding suddenly accelerated and tried to speed out with the other pterosaurs that were following closely behind. However, Musasobo Benkei smiled slightly. You can't get out. I'll wait for you here. Indeed, as Musasobo Benkei said, when everyone was still a short distance away from the gap was almost closed. However, just when everyone was helpless, a black-purple ripple suddenly appeared in front of the pterosaurs that were flying at high speed. The pterosaurs, Gadotsi, and the others plunged into it and the portal immediately closed. Seeing this scene, Musasobo Benkei could not help but frown. His Excellency Hyun Ryong? At this point, the gap was completely closed without a single gap. A second ago, in the world outside the gap, Wuming floated in the air and opened the portal. In an instant, a few pterosaurs that were not small flew out. Then Wuming instantly closed the portal. I finally found you. Wuming looked at Godatsi and the others who were on the pterosaur's back. Assassin, you're finally here. Godatsi's face lit up with joy. I arrived just in time. If I was any later, I wouldn't have been able to save you. When Wuming arrived, he happened to see Godatsi and the others flying toward him in the darkness. He saw that there was a gap that was rapidly closing, so Wuming directly opened a portal on the path that the pterosaurs had to pass through. That was how he managed to save Godatsi and the others. I understand the situation now. You guys can return to Uruk first. Leave the rest to me. When Wuming saw Musasobo Benkei standing on the back of a black pterosaur, he guessed that he was probably assimilated by the black mud. However, just when Godatsi and Matthew wanted to say something, Merlin suddenly became serious. Are you ready? I'm ready. This was Wuming's answer, and he was quite certain. Then I'll leave it to you. In this regard, Wuming did not say anything and only nodded. Godatsi and Matthew also shut their mouths and did not speak again. I won't leave. I want to stay. Nuakamaru suddenly interrupted rather calmly. Without a doubt, she chose to stay because of Musasobo Benkei. You might die. Wuming answered her simply. I'm sorry, Your Excellency Hyun Ryong. I've made up my mind. Wuming nodded. Since her attitude had already reached this point, he did not need to persuade her anymore. Ms. Nuakamaru, Nyoruo. Godatsi and Matthew did not know what to say and looked worried. On the contrary, Nuakamaru was quite optimistic. Your Excellency Fujimaru, Your Excellency Matthew, take care. The three of them looked at each other and nodded. After that, Quizzard spoke again. This is for you. She stretched out her hand and there was a fiery red stone in her hand that seemed to be burning. This was the noble phantasm that Quizzard had just cast, the solar ephemeris, Piedra del Sol. This noble phantasm is activated by the solar ephemeris. Can be said that it's a one-time use noble phantasm. After it's activated, it won't be deactivated, so I want to give it to you to use up. I should have used this trick earlier. Then your subordinates wouldn't have been in trouble. Quizzard said as if she was blaming herself. In this regard, Nuakamaru shook his head. It's not your fault, Your Excellency Quizzard. The rain of black mud was getting more and more difficult to dodge, so it was not an accident that it was hit. Moreover, this was a one-time use noble phantasm, so it must be kept for critical occasions. What's more, Quizzard immediately used this noble phantasm when there was an accident just now. It was obvious that she was not someone who did not know the severity of the situation. At this moment, Quizzard wanted to give this activated noble phantasm to Nuakamaru and let Nuakamaru use it up. I'll take it. After that, Nuakamaru's hand held the solar ephemeris. Chapter 1026. Wuming opened the portal to Uruk and let Godatsi and the others go back. Before they left, Ishtar, who had recovered a bit of strength, complained to Wuming, as if Wuming had done something to her. After closing the portal quickly, Wuming looked at Nuakamaru, who was not present. At this moment, Nuakamaru's right hand was clenched into a fist, and smoke was coming out of it. That was the sign that the solar ephemeris was causing damage to Nuakamaru's body, or rather, the spirit base. You really don't have to do this. Wuming spoke again, although he knew it was useless. The Ocean Venerable followed me to the end this time, so I can't leave him behind. Then, Nuakamaru changed the topic. By the way, Sir Hyunryong, have you prepared your trump card? Wuming nodded and looked in the direction he came from. Almost, but I still have something to do, and you're here. What Wuming meant was that Nuakamaru could help Wuming complete this matter. Please tell me, sir. I will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. At this moment, Nuakamaru was like a loyal warrior, waiting for the king's order. Wuming smiled at this. It's not that serious. I just need you to force Tiamat out. Force her out? Nuakamaru was stunned. What should she do? And Wuming looked at her hand, or rather, the solar ephemeris in her hand. I need you to burn the black mud. On the other side, on the sea of black mud, Wuming sat cross-legged on the sea with his eyes closed, as if waiting for something. However, Wuming's shaking fingers showed that Wuming was not just waiting. He was constructing a tactic to summon his trump card. That trump card was not his noble phantasm. He needed the help of Kalis, who was in the route, to complete the summoning of this trump card. The reason why Kalis did not say much was that she was focusing on perfecting this trump card. The one who went to rescue Gadatsi and the others was Wuming's doppelganger, which was transformed from a dependent, except for the only weapon that could not be replicated. Wuming's doppelganger had 100% of Wuming's strength. Other than saving Gadatsi and the others, Wuming's clone had another mission. Wuming's trump card still needed a primer before it could be used. Only when Tiamat truly appeared would he be able to use it. Thus, luring out Tiamat was another mission of the doppelganger. Coincidentally, Quizzard had given the solar almanac to Nuakamaru, so Wuming's doppelganger did not need to do anything else other than use the solar almanac to burn the black mud. Although there was no way to completely burn the black mud, Wuming speculated that as long as a part of it was burned, Tiamat would definitely appear. Wuming guessed that this black mud was most likely something that belonged to Tiamat's body. Thus, as long as a part of it was burned, Tiamat would definitely appear. Wuming, on the other hand, only needed to wait quietly and design a supportive tactic. Suddenly, the eastern side of the sky turned red, and the light of the fire soared. It was obvious that Nuakamaru had begun to use the solar almanac to burn the sea of black mud. And it was also at this moment that the entire sea of black mud, as well as the space of black mud in the southeast where Gadatsi and the others had been trapped, began to produce powerful magical fluctuations. And along with this powerful magical fluctuation, Wuming's trump card, which he had prepared long ago, also began to form a connection with this world. Is Tiamat about to come out? Wuming opened his eyes and looked in the southwest direction, then looked at the sea of black mud beneath him and took a deep breath. The moment had finally arrived. Wuming was about to activate this trump card that had been born out of a sudden whim. Let's begin, Kalis. Yes, master. After the conversation, Wuming's body seemed to have given up all resistance and accepted the gravitational force, sinking directly into the sea of black mud. On the other side of Wuming's clone, Nuakamaru fell into the sea of black mud, and the solar almanac in her hand burned the black mud around her. The black mud dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye, but this could be said to be harmless to the sea of black mud. However, calling out Tiamat only required a little stimulation. Whether or not the black mud could evaporate was not within Wuming's consideration. It was just like how mosquitoes sucking blood would not cause much harm to humans, but humans would always react when they realized that their blood was being sucked. Feeling the increasingly turbulent magical power around him, Wuming's clone nodded silently, then waved his hand and opened a teleportation portal beside Nuakamaru. That's enough, Nuakamaru. Return to Uruk. What's next is not something you can handle. Wuming shouted at Nuakamaru. Nuakamaru's spiritual base was gradually collapsing as she released a relic that did not belong to her. If this were to continue, there was no doubt that she would leave. Wuming did not want to kill Nuakamaru. However, Nuakamaru did not seem to hear what Wuming said, as she continued to release the flames and lava from the solar almanac. Nuakamaru's face was a little twisted. It seemed like Nuakamaru's mental state was not very good, and she was probably on the verge of turning evil. Wuming controlled the teleportation portal to swallow Nuakamaru, leaving the solar almanac alone. Wuming's clone went to the solar almanac and held it with one hand, injecting a large amount of magical power into it. Since it was a one-time relic, Wuming's clone decided to inject magical power into it before the relic lost its function completely until the solar almanac could no longer take it or dissipate it. The solar almanac was getting more and more ferocious as it received an endless supply of magical power. Countless flames and lava were surging as if they were going to destroy the world, constantly devouring the sea of black mud. This time, it was no longer a mosquito bite, but a venomous worm bite. Then, before the solar almanac could self-destruct, the entire sea of black mud went berserk. Like a deep-sea monster that appeared from the ocean, the sea of black mud soared into the sky like a dragon sucking in water. It was so fast and its range was so wide that it was shocking. Wu Ming's clone, who was in the range, escaped through the teleportation portal at the last moment with the solar almanac and arrived at where Wu Ming was previously. The two places were quite far apart, and the sea there was only shaking. Wu Ming's clone exclaimed as he watched the sky and water turn dark. It's a little sudden, but this proves that Tiamat is panicking. The solar almanac's movement earlier was considered to have hurt Tiamat. Otherwise, the sea of black mud would not have such a huge movement. After all, it was a one-time relic of the South American master god. After receiving Wu Ming's massive magical power, even Tiamat could not be unaffected. Wu Ming raised his hand and looked at the solar almanac that was about to burn out. He made a decision. It's time for you to fulfill your final mission. Wu Ming weighed it and then threw it to the place where the sky and water were so dark that he could not see the situation clearly. In the next second, the solar almanac was like the sun that shone on everything, releasing its last ray of light in the sky. A gigantic dragon beast that was many times bigger than the 11 demonic beasts earlier was standing there with its eyes closed. That was Tiamat. Chapter 1027. Tiamat's body was covered with black mud. At a glance, it was pitch black without any extra color. Her 4 limbs were on the ground in the posture of a beast, and only her mouth was faintly visible with an exaggerated degree of crack. This oppressive feeling, as expected of the goddess of creation. Wu Ming's doppelganger's tone was full of emotion. Couldn't be helped. Anyone who saw this scene would feel the same way, such as Gadotsi and the others who were far away in Uruk. Because of Wu Ming's vigilance, the 5 magical beasts trapped in Ereshkigal's underworld didn't do anything. After Mayu brought the letter to Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh allowed Mayu to take part of the combat power to the underworld to investigate. After that, Mayu took Enkidu, Fanbaba, and Zhuge Kongming, who rarely came out, to the underworld. According to Zhuge Kongming's idea, he restudied the seal of divine right, Dinger, and wanted to find a magical beast to test it out. The 5 magical beasts were indeed, as Wu Ming said. The underworld didn't restrict them. Ereshkigal almost failed. Fortunately, Mayu arrived with reinforcements, and Zhuge Kongming's new seal of divine right, Dinger, was also verified. The price was that the 5 magical beasts died. After that, Ereshkigal didn't continue to stay in the underworld, and Zhuge Kongming also didn't stay in the house. At this moment, everyone, including Ereshkigal and Zhuge Kongming, and those who returned to Uruk, gathered on the southwest city wall, looking at Tiamat's figure in the distance, which was illuminated by the solar calendar stone. Although a large sea of black mud formed Tiamat's body, there was still a large sea of black mud spreading on the ground, and it didn't seem to decrease at all. That's Tiamat. Gadotsi's throat moved. Obviously, she was surprised and afraid of Tiamat. Even Quizzard, Ishtar, Ereshkigal, and other goddesses felt a trace of fear. It was enough to show how powerful Tiamat's deterrence was. Tiamat appeared in the depths of the Persian Gulf, which was the Indian Ocean region. It was thousands of miles away from Uruk city. However, even so, because of Tiamat's huge body, Gadotsi and the others could see Tiamat from Uruk. Before this, everyone in Uruk was ordered by Gilgamesh to stay in their homes or temporary residences to pray. They were not allowed to go out and ignore anything that happened outside. Therefore, Tiamat's appearance didn't cause any panic among the humans in Uruk. That's right. That huge dragon beast is the creation mother of Mesopotamia, Tiamat. Merlin walked to the front as a commentator. Tiamat's body was used to create the world, which means that her body must be huge. However, this size is beyond my imagination. Roman's sarcastic voice came from Gudatsi's bracelet. However, now wasn't the time to talk about this, right? How were they going to fight such a huge Tiamat god? Doctor, can you still track Assassin's location? Before thinking about how to fight Tiamat, Gudatsi was first worried about Wuming. No, it's too far away. Plus, the black mud has a disruptive effect. There's no way to detect Hyunryong's location. However, at this moment, a young voice came into everyone's ears. Brother Wuming is fine. Meiyu looked into the distance with eyes full of trust. Although everyone was baffled by the fact that she was Wuming's sister, Meiyu's aura was indeed Wuming's. Couldn't be faked. Brother Wuming saved my world and Ilya's world. At the same time, he also saved me, Ilya, and Blackie. Brother Wuming saved everyone. This time, I believe that Brother Wuming will also save everyone. That was the trust between Meiyu and Wuming. As soon as those words came out, everyone was no longer worried about Wuming. Even their fear of Tiamat was reduced a lot. Following this atmosphere, Merlin, who acted as a commentator, spoke again. The beast of original sin has appeared. The human's evil will lead to the appearance of the crown servant. In addition, the appearance of one evil will lead to the birth of another evil. The crown servant has already appeared. The next thing to be born is a new human's evil. Thus, to fight against the beast of original sin. Merlin's words were ethereal and deeply rooted in people's hearts. The entire Uruk seemed to have heard it, including Gudatsi and the others beside Merlin. In the next second, reflecting Merlin's words, the crown servant has already appeared. A bell sounded out of thin air. Dang, dang, dang. Gudatsi and Matthew couldn't help but shiver. In the next second, an old man wearing a tattered linen and a hood stood in the middle of the crowd. Ha! Gudatsi and Matthew were shocked. Although the others were shocked by the old man's infiltration method, they didn't show anything because they were used to not showing their emotions. Obeying the will of heaven, the crown assassin, Hassan Sabah, gives the opportunity to live from death. The old man's words were old but full of confidence. Gudatsi, Matthew, and Roman and Leonardo da Vinci in Chaldea were all surprised. This old man was the first Hassan that Gudatsi and the others had asked to see at the Azrael temple. Come on, the evil that represents the opposite of the crown, the existence that has inherited the name of the beast, the apex of evil in the human fire worship sect, the three-headed demonic dragon, appear here. The entire sea of black mud was turbulent, and the source of the turbulence was near the coastline of the former Persian Gulf. In the next second, the turbulence increased, and Uruk City was affected as if there was an earthquake. Then, a huge pure white figure leaped out of the sea of black mud, hovered in the sky a few times, and dispelled part of the black clouds before landing on the sea of black mud. It was a behemoth that was not inferior to Tiamat, but its color was completely opposite to the dark Tiamat. This behemoth was pure white. Like Tiamat, it was like a beast with 4 limbs on the ground, and a pair of folded gray wings on its back. In addition, this pure white behemoth had 3 heads, with a pair of dragon horns on the middle head, a crown on the left head, and nothing on the right head. It seemed lifeless as its head drooped. In addition, the pure white behemoth was holding 2 demonic beasts that were larger than humans in size. They were Musu Maf and Kururu, who had escaped. The black beast and the pure white beast stood opposite each other with their eyes closed as if waiting for an opportunity. That is. In response to Gudatsi's question, Merlin, as the commentator, continued to speak. One of the evil points in the Persian fire worship sect's mythology, the 3-headed demonic dragon that once destroyed half of the world, Az-Dahaka, has now appeared as another human evil beast. Gudatsi and Matthew were shocked. However, Ishtar, who had almost recovered, noticed a clue. She realized that she had seen the 3-headed demonic dragon's middle head before. Wait, is this 3-headed demonic dragon transformed by Hyunryong? Hey? Gudatsi and Matthew looked at Ishtar in disbelief. Look, the 3-headed demonic dragon's middle head is basically the same as the head of Hyunryong's dragon body. Isn't it? Everyone looked at the place where Ishtar pointed. Gudatsi, Matthew, Quizzard, Leopard Man, and Anna had never seen Wuming's dragon body, so they were not sure. However, Gilgamesh and Nuakamaru definitely knew. When Wuming transformed into his dragon body and fought with Gorgon, although they were still far away, Nuakamaru, as a servant, must have some impression of it. However, the only ones who knew the most were Merlin, the cheater, and Enkidu and Funbaba, who had always been by Wuming's side. Immediately, Enkidu spoke. That's right, that human evil is indeed Hyunryong Sama's transformation. It was summoned by Crown Assassin and another human evil. Human evils were attracted to each other. When a human evil appeared, other human evils would appear in turn. This was destined. And Crown Servant, as the suppression mechanism of human evils, would naturally appear together with human evils. In other words, where human evils appeared, there must be Crown Servant, and where Crown Servant appeared, there must be human evils. However, this became a contradiction. In the end, did the Crown Servant appear first, or did the beast appear first? Wuming relied on Crown Assassin and the double primer to successfully appear as a Crown Servant. And as the carrier, naturally, was the three-headed demonic dragon Az Dakaha's body that Wuming obtained from the box world. Chapter 1028. Back then, when Wuming inherited Az Dakaha's human final trial identity in the box and returned to the root, Wuming suddenly had the idea of transferring the human final trial identity to Az Dakaha's body. It was not to revive Az Dakaha, but to reconstruct a new body based on Az Dakaha's body to act as the human final trial's absolute evil. When Wuming entered the Mesopotamia singularity, his spiritual base was forged from Az Dakaha's body. Kalas continued to perfect and refine the concept of the human final trial in the root, adding the concept of the human final trial identity to Wuming's spiritual base created by Az Dakaha. However, later on, after realizing that the enemy was the human evil, Wuming had a new idea: to use the human evil's identity to appear. Merlin also said that the human evil and the crown servant were attracted to each other. If one existed, the other would exist. Likewise, the human evil and the human evil would also attract each other. If one existed, the other would also appear. This was an unbreakable rule. The human final trial identity was similar to the human evil identity itself. Furthermore, Az Dakaha belonged to Persian mythology, and Persia was a part of Mesopotamia. Therefore, with the crown servant assassin and the other human evil as the primer, and with the suppression force behind Wuming giving him some face, the new human evil, Beast 7 Az Dakaha, was naturally born. The human evil seventh beast is Lord Hyunryong's trump card. Because this human evil was controlled by Wuming, although it was harmful to humans, Wuming would not actively harm humans. He would leave the Type Moon world after eliminating the other human evil, Tiamat, so he would not harm humans. It was even possible that after he left, the human evil would automatically leave him and return to the real Beast 7. That's right, the human evil was transformed from the love of the 7 humans. Wuming was only temporarily using a series of methods to appear as the 7th beast, but he did not truly become the human evil. However, if the human evil that inherited the 7th beast remained in the Type Moon world, it would be qualified to become the new beast and replace the original 7th beast. After all, the scene that Az Dakaha, who inherited the final trial's absolute evil, most wanted to see was the human hero standing on its corpse and advancing towards a better future. In a sense, this was also considered love. After all, the human final trial's absolute evil in the Type Moon world was an evil that humans had to overcome. It was fully qualified to do so. The human evil against the human evil. This is Hyunryong's trump card. Merlin said the final words. Now, the battle of the beasts that only exists in fantasy is about to begin. Following Merlin's words, Enkidu, who was originally carrying Funbaba, put down Funbaba and flew into the sky. It turned into a dazzling silver chain and flew towards the pure white three-headed demonic dragon, wrapping around its drooping head. In the next second, the three-headed demonic dragon's 3 heads opened their eyes at the same time. Red pupils, and blue pupils appeared in the eyes of the 3 heads respectively. Trinity, huh? Gilgamesh saw the 3-headed demonic dragon's current state. The three heads were occupied by three different spiritual bases. One of them was Wuming's, another was Enkidu's, and the last one seemed to be Wuming's magic attire. It's rare to see a magic attire with a spiritual base alone, Zhuge Kongming commented. Then, as the three-headed demonic dragon opened its eyes, Tiamat on the opposite side also opened her eyes, revealing a pair of shining starry eyes. Roar! The three-headed demonic dragon roared like an ordinary beast. A. Tiamat let out a mournful cry that sounded like a song. The two giant beasts let out their own roars, and then the battle began. After the roar ended, the pure white giant beast casually swallowed Musu Mafu and Kururu as if it was demonstrating its power. A. The pitch-black giant beast expressed its anger. Its roar contained a powerful magical power, and the sea of black mud was forcefully split apart by this magical power. However, the pure white giant beast wasn't affected by this roar at all. It spread the curled shadow wings on its back. The shadow wings covered the sky and were so huge that they were bigger than the pure white giant beast's body. With the help of the shadow wings, the pure white giant beast flew into the sky. Its mouth contained a white light that could destroy the world, and it suddenly shot it toward the pitch-black giant beast. Dong! The tyrant's halo hit Tiamat, and the white light covered everything in the surroundings. It even covered the solar almanac that had long disappeared, and it lit up the sky and the earth. In an instant, it was as bright as day. The Uruk city was very far away from the place where the two giant beasts were fighting. Moreover, the Uruk was protected by Wuming's relic, so the battle between the two giant beasts wouldn't affect the Uruk at all. Although they didn't know what was going on outside, they still followed Gilgamesh's orders. The humans were still praying in their homes, and they didn't care about what was going on outside. They just prayed that the end of the world would be over as soon as possible. On the city wall in the southwest of Uruk, everyone covered their eyes. There was no other reason as the light was too glaring, and they couldn't see what was going on clearly. However, in the end, everyone walked down the city wall. After all, they couldn't just close their eyes and stare blankly. However, at that moment, everyone understood that the battle between the two giant beasts was not something that they could intervene in. If Quizzard wasn't a servant but a god, she could still intervene. However, no matter if it was a servant or a body, they couldn't intervene, including Ishtar. Damn it, Hyunryong. If you lose, I won't forgive you, Ishtar muttered because she couldn't do anything. God bless, Master Hyunryong. You must win. Ishtar glanced at it, and it turned out that her demigod Ereshkigal was praying to the god. Hey, are you a god yourself? Ishtar couldn't help but complain. I'm willing, can't I? Ereshkigal blushed and stared back at Ishtar. Although the two were half-sisters, they didn't get along well. However, to Ereshkigal's surprise, Ishtar didn't refute Ereshkigal. Instead, she comforted her. Don't worry, Hyunryong won't lose. He saved the Uruk. We just need to believe and wait. Although Ishtar's gentleness was somewhat uncomfortable, Ereshkigal felt good. She remembered what Wuming said at the beginning. It seemed that Wuming didn't lie. Ishtar was actually a good goddess. While Ereshkigal was stunned, Gilgamesh suddenly spoke. Funbaba, with your strength, you should be able to help. Gilgamesh stood in front of Funbaba, who was rubbing her eyes, and said so. Master told me to stay here, Funbaba said in a childish voice. Gilgamesh raised his eyebrows, but then Gilgamesh realized why Wuming asked Funbaba to stay here. So that's how it is, you are also a crown. Gudatsi and Matthew were surprised. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci of Chaldea were also surprised. Why does it seem like a crown is cheap? Two human evils naturally need two crown servants. Hyunryong just let Funbaba temporarily accept the identity of the crown rider to maintain the situation of two human evils. Once Funbaba uses her power, the power of the crown rider will be lost. In short, he used the contradiction between crown servants and human evils. The first thing to know was that there was no rule that the number of human evils needed to be the same number of crown servants. Originally, the crown assassin appeared because of Beast 2, but the crown assassin was used by Wu Ming to pair with his own Beast 7. As a result, the second beast lost its corresponding crown servant. As a result, there must be another crown servant to maintain the balance. Wu Ming must maintain this state so that the contradiction will not be broken and he can continue to exist. At this moment, Wu Ming was not the real Beast 7. He could only use this method to make himself appear. Hearing Merlin's clear and logical analysis, everyone was enlightened. However, there was something that Merlin didn't understand. Merlin could understand why the first Hassan cooperated with Wu Ming's action. After all, the two had met before. But what about Fanbaba? She was neither a servant nor a human. How could she take on the title of writer? The reason was that the suppression force was Wu Ming's backer. He temporarily put the title of writer on Fanbaba without the slightest pressure. Wu Ming paid the price anyway. During the acceptance of the title, Fanbaba couldn't use her power. However, Merlin would never know the answer. Chapter 1029. Outside Gadotsi and the others, the white light that was capable of destroying the world gradually weakened until it disappeared. If Gadotsi and the others came out to take a look, they would be shocked beyond words. This was because the black mud that originally covered the ground had completely disappeared after the white light dissipated. No, it didn't disappear. It had been destroyed by the white light that had destroyed a third of the world. The hegemon's halo, Kfarina, contained an inheritance that could destroy a third of the world. It was known as the strongest gift of the Flash faction in the Box Garden world, and could be said to be AZ Dakaha's proudest move. This was because this move was the manifestation of the three-headed dragon's inheritance that had destroyed a third of the world. It was a move that completely belonged to AZ Dakaha. Unfortunately, Wu Ming's spiritual base had fused with AZ Dakaha's body. This move that he was so proud of also belonged to Wu Ming. Wu Ming had used the ability to destroy a third of the world to choose to destroy the black mud that had covered half of Mesopotamia. Logically speaking, even the hegemon's halo shouldn't be able to destroy half of the black mud in one go. However, this was the black mud of the origin. Wu Ming only needed to add the power of origin to the hegemon's halo, and it was like a hot knife cutting through butter. It was very easy to destroy the black mud that had come ashore. Even the black clouds in the sky dissipated, revealing the sun in the west. The long period of black clouds caused people's perception of time to become blurry. Even day and night were somewhat blurred. For example, when the solar ephemeris acted as the sun to reflect Tiamat's figure, Gadotsi and the others thought that it was night. Wu Ming was also one of the people who had such a misunderstanding. Is the day almost over? The three-headed dragon's head with large dragon horns looked at the sun that had already moved to the west and side. This head belonged to Wu Ming. He hadn't done anything, but he realized that more than half the time had passed. Looks like tonight is going to be a sleepless night. Wu Ming, who was flying in the sky, looked down again. Because Wu Ming had removed the black mud that surged onto the land, the seawater observatory along the Persian Gulf coast reappeared. However, the lighthouse-like observatory had been broken down in the middle, and the collapsed part was nowhere to be seen. No longer paying attention to the collapsed observatory, Wu Ming landed on the coast of the Persian Gulf and folded his wings. The black mud on the land had indeed been cleared away by Wu Ming, but the black mud in the sea was not reduced at all. At this moment, from the Persian Gulf to the Indian Ocean in the distance, the sea surface was pitch black and looked quite muddy. There was basically no seawater, only black mud. After all, the tyrant's halo had destroyed one-third of the world. Wu Ming's ability to wipe out half of the black mud on the continent was already a rare effect. As for wiping out the entire ocean of black mud, Wu Ming was temporarily unable to do so. This was because the entire Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean connected to it had turned into black mud, and the Indian Ocean could even be called the Black Mud Ocean. As for Tiamat, she was not dead anyway. She was probably thrown into the sea of black mud by Wu Ming's halo. Just as Wu Ming was vigilant, a melodious sound wave came from the sea. A. The three-headed dragon immediately spread its shadow wings, including itself, to block the sound wave. It suddenly spread its wings, and the shadow wings instantly dispersed the sound wave. Master, in the myths, Tiamat didn't have many special abilities, but she was quite good at spirit of speech. The head on the left of the three-headed dragon with a crown suddenly spoke. This was the head controlled by Kalas. Mother is the mother goddess of creation. She doesn't need or have many abilities. Her body is her strongest weapon. This time, it was the head on the right of the three-headed dragon that spoke. This was the head controlled by Enkidu. Indeed, with her huge dragon body, just a casual attack from her is filled with power. In addition to her almost unbeatable authority, she doesn't need any extra power at all. Wuming nodded. The so-called power didn't refer to having fancy abilities, but to being able to defeat the opponent no matter how many or how strong their abilities were. Wuming was almost the same as Tiamat. Ever since Wuming found out that he was the origin dragon, he didn't put much effort into pursuing power because the key to his power was the power of the origin dragon and the powerful body of the origin dragon. It was apparent that Tiamat was the same. Her body was her best weapon. Not only that, but Tiamat also had some terrifying abilities. For example, her authority, the Sea of Life. The Sea of Life had a cell-level forced conversion effect called aminogeas. It could turn any creature that came into contact with or entered her Sea of Life into one of their own. Musasobo Benkei had fallen for this trick. This ability existed before the Black Origin Mud and Tiamat fused. After fusing with the Black Origin Mud, this ability was only strengthened, although it was a little too much. At this moment, the Persian Gulf and the entire Indian Ocean were Tiamat's Sea of Life. Wuming couldn't kill her in the Sea of Life. To give a less precise example, could you die of a common cold while receiving treatment in a famous provincial hospital? Although it was too absolute to say that it was 100%, it was indeed impossible to die from a cold under such conditions. After the song was broken by Wuming, the Sea of Black Origin Mud began to stir again. Then, masses of Black Origin Mud surged and condensed, forming a huge body. This was exactly the same as Tiamat's dragon body, but the size was completely different. This time, Tiamat's body was obviously bigger than before. This meant that Tiamat's body was bigger than the three-headed demonic dragon at the moment. Is the entire Sea of Life Tiamat's body? If Wuming was still guessing before, his parents were now certain of it. It seemed that the space that Gadotsi and the others brought with them was indeed inside Tiamat's body. However, why didn't Tiamat attack Gadotsi and the others? Instead, Ishtar only began to move after she blasted a hole in the space. Was Tiamat still asleep? Or was there some other reason? This is troublesome. Wuming realized that he couldn't defeat Tiamat. However, Tiamat shouldn't be able to defeat the three-headed demonic dragon either. Tiamat opened her huge mouth. The sound wave that was full of magic struck again, and this time, it was more powerful than the last time. Wuming dared to say that even if Matthew activated his noble phantasm, he might not be able to block this attack. It was enough to show how powerful the sound wave was. However, it was still useless against the three-headed demonic dragon. At this moment, the three-headed demonic dragon was a powerful existence driven by the fusion of Wuming, Kalas, and Enkidu's spiritual base. Kalas aside, Wuming's spiritual base was the best among the servants, and Enkidu's real body was even more powerful. Together with Kalas, the three of them became a trinity. The three-headed demonic dragon that bore the name of fire worship sex evil dragon, Az-Dahaka, was already in existence that no servant could match. No, it should be said that the three-headed demonic dragon at this moment was not an existence that could be defeated simply by having powerful strength. After all, the three-headed demonic dragon's current identity was a human evil, and defeating a human evil often required not only strength, but also wisdom, human wisdom. Both sides were human evil, so neither side could do anything to the other. However, Wuming still had the upper hand at the moment. After all, he was once a human, and the three-headed demonic dragon was a trinity existence. At this moment, Tiamat was facing three existences, which was 3 against 1. That was the advantage that Tiamat did not have. Master, I detected a powerful binding on Goddess Tiamat's body. Binding? Yes, and it seems that Tiamat added the binding herself. Chapter 1030. Even after fusing with the three-headed demon dragon's spiritual base, Kalas was still able to use her own abilities. That crown was the manifestation of Kalas' ability. Kalas had always been cautious and conscientious. She did all sorts of research, probing, and testing on Tiamat in an attempt to find out what weaknesses she had. The heavens rewarded those who worked hard. Kalas actually managed to discover the problem with Tiamat. That was, Tiamat had self-restraints. Tiamat is the creator goddess of Mesopotamia. The dragon body in front of us can be said to be the spiritual base of Tiamat after she fell and became a beast. Even so, Tiamat is still extremely powerful. However, the strange thing is, the Tiamat that we fought against wasn't as powerful as we thought. Wu-Ming voiced out the strange that Kalas mentioned. That's right, Master. When Tiamat fought against us, she didn't display much power. This is the strangest thing. Even without Wu-Ming, the current Tiamat wasn't undefeatable or despairing to Gudatsi and the others. That was, Tiamat didn't have an overwhelming and decisive ability. This wasn't something that a creator goddess should have. The only ability that Tiamat still had was the Sea of Life. However, it could even block Nabistan's Fong for a while. Couldn't be considered an overwhelming ability. The Sea of Life couldn't even compare to Wu-Ming's Hegemon's Halo. At the very least, the Hegemon's Halo could instantly destroy the black mud on the ground, while the Sea of Life couldn't instantly flood the ground. However, even if Tiamat has self-restraints, we can't do anything to her. Wu-Ming was not facing the problem of weakening Tiamat, but the problem of not being able to stop Tiamat. Wu-Ming wasn't afraid of Tiamat, who didn't have overwhelming power, but he couldn't defeat Tiamat or stop Tiamat's actions. Tiamat's Sea of Life covered the entire Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. If they did not destroy it completely, there was no way to defeat Tiamat. This was what Wu-Ming couldn't do to Tiamat. The reason why Tiamat couldn't do anything to Wu-Ming was because Tiamat didn't have any overwhelming moves. No, Master, you can seal Tiamat, Kalas suggested to Wu-Ming. Kalas was an artificial spirit that supported the top magic attire. When it was first created, it had extremely high intelligence and could deal with all kinds of situations. Later on, Kelly became Wu-Ming's noble artifact, and had undergone the baptism of the origin together with Wu-Ming's main body, which made her stand out from the rest. Regardless of whether it was the magical attire's performance or the artificial elf's wisdom, she was far ahead of the rest. Since Kalas was able to suggest this, the idea was feasible. You're saying that I should use the 12 incarnations? But I can't use it in this state. Wu-Ming could use it previously because the spiritual base of human evil wasn't completed, so it left behind a self-protection mechanism. Now that human evil's spiritual base was completed, Wu-Ming's original abilities were temporarily lost. After all, this was a human evil spiritual base that was transformed from the corpse of the three-headed demonic dragon, Az-Dakaha. To activate this spiritual base, it even required the trinity of Wu-Ming, Enkidu, and Kalas. Although this spiritual base was unprecedentedly powerful, there were also many disadvantages. Wu-Ming's inability to use his own abilities was one of them. This spiritual base was considered a complete product in terms of strength, but in other aspects it was still considered a half-finished product. Could be modified in the future, but now wasn't the time to do so. Master, this spiritual base contains a sovereign sun and 2 simulated star maps. They can be used by you. When Kalas said that, Wu-Ming couldn't help but be stunned. Of course, I know that Az-Dakaha has a Vesta, but whether it can be used on Tiamat is another matter. The three-headed demonic dragon, fire worship sect, came from Mesopotamia. The Avesta's user was a three-headed demonic dragon, so it couldn't be used on humans or fire worship sect's abilities. The former was because this was the final trial for humans, while the latter was because of homology. Although Tiamat wasn't a god that belonged to fire worship sect directly, fire worship sect's roots were still in Mesopotamia. The box garden world was particular about inheritance. Mesopotamia and fire worship sect had deep connections, so this ability might not be used. Moreover, Avesta didn't have the sealing effect. Also, you said that there are additional simulated star maps in Azidakaha's body? Wuming was a little moved. Having a simulated star map was a great fortune for anyone, but Azidakaha had two. How could Wuming not be moved? It was normal that Wuming didn't know about Azidakaha's gift. When Azidakaha's spirit had died, Wuming had placed his body in the gift card and returned to the root for Kalas to transform. Because his physical body was still alive, the power that existed in Azidakaha's body wouldn't be like when Silent killed Maxwell, which resulted in a falling object. Only the tyrant's halo was used by Azidakaha in front of Wuming. As for Avesta, Azidakaha didn't even have time to use it before it was sealed by Wuming's golden sword. Wuming had heard about Avesta's specific effects from Galgi. Forget it. Kalas, control the body. Enron, help me. I'll go inside and take a look. Yes, Master. Yes, Master Hyun-ryong. After Wuming finished speaking, the middle head of the three-headed demonic dragon drooped down as if it had lost its soul. After that, the three-headed demonic dragon's entire body was controlled by Kalas with Enkidu assisting from the side. The three-headed demonic dragon once again gathered the tyrant's halo in its mouth. Even if it couldn't kill Tiamat, it had to constantly interfere. Tiamat, on the other hand, let out a sorrowful and angry song. On the surface of the Sea of Life, something seemed to have appeared and began to shake. Inside the spirit base. When Wuming said to take a look inside, he meant to go to the depths of the spirit base to take a look. The three-headed demonic dragon was a trinity, and Wuming, who was one of them, could naturally do this easily. Wuming, who had turned into a ball of consciousness, came to the interior of the spirit base. In front of Wuming, there were 3 balls of light. 2 of them emitted the starry light of the universe, while the remaining 1 emitted the light of the sun. There was no doubt that this was a sun sovereignty and 2 simulated star map creation. Wuming reached out his hand to one of the simulated star map creation and immediately sensed the effect and name of this simulated star map creation. Is this Avesta? Wuming's hand separated from the ball of light and no longer cared about it. Then, the remaining 2 are the sun sovereignty and the additional simulated star map creation that Kalas mentioned. Wuming placed his 2 hands on the balls of light without hesitation. In an instant, the information of the sun sovereignty and simulated star map creation was transmitted to Wuming's mind. Dragon's sun sovereignty and simulated star map creation. Virtual star, Tai Sui. Chapter 1031. This simulated star map is interesting. Wuming showed a thoughtful expression. When Azidakaha had fought with Wuming, he had only used the new ability that he had obtained after assimilating with the Black Origin Mud. He had not used any of his original abilities. Even if he had used it, he had only used the Hegemon's halo. Wuming had thought that Azidakaha had underestimated his opponent. However, it seemed that this was not the case at all. The reason why Azidakaha had not used his own abilities was because those abilities would not have any effect on Wuming. Azidakaha had 2 powerful gifts. One was the simulated star map, Avesta, and the other was the Hegemon's halo, Kvarina. The former made Azidakaha invincible in the box world, while the latter was Azidakaha's signature. Possessing the former was enough for Azidakaha. What the strong possessed was not some flashy ability, but the ability to defeat the enemy. Eating the world with a single move also existed. However, there were times when one trick to eat everything did not work. For example, Azidakaha and Tiamat. The reason why Azidakaha had the dragon's sun sovereignty and the simulated star map, virtual star Tai Sui, was because Azidakaha had naturally fused with his body when he broke the seal. That's right. Just like the no-name flag was one of the items that broke the seal, these 2 items were items that sealed Azidakaha. The dragon's sun sovereignty only had the effect of strengthening the spirit core. However, every simulated star map had restrictions. Coincidentally, virtual star Tai Sui's restrictions prevented Azidakaha from using it. Avesta was also useless against Wuming because Azidakaha couldn't absorb, cancel, or borrow the power of the origin. It could only use its new ability after combining with the black origin mud to deal with Wuming. This was why Azdakaha didn't use its own ability. It was the same for Tiamat. The Sea of Life could be said to be the bane of all things, but after fusing with the black origin mud, Wuming developed a resistance, because Wuming and the black origin mud were of the same origin. In addition, Tiamat had sealed herself, causing Tiamat to be unable to take down Wuming. Wuming was also facing the same problem at this moment. The ability of the Trinity as Daka, one of the 7 great human evils, was also unable to destroy Tiamat. Therefore, when one move was no longer fresh and could no longer dominate the world, a new move was needed. And Kalas found a new move for Wuming, which was the illusory star Taisui. Through the contact of his arm with the ball of light, Wuming also learned of the illusory star Taisui's ability. It ignored all conditions and forcefully sealed natural gods and star spirits. This was the ability of the illusory star Taisui, and Tiamat happened to be a natural god. This was the method that Kalas had mentioned to seal Tiamat. After Kalas's adjustment, the dragon's sun sovereignty and the simulated star map illusory star Taisui in Azdakaha's body had completely become the spiritual base's item, or rather, its ability. Therefore, Wuming could ignore the restrictions of the illusory star Taisui and use it directly. Then, let's begin. After Wuming finished speaking, the ball of light that his right hand touched emitted a huge amount of starlight, which instantly enveloped Wuming's consciousness. In the outside world, the 3-headed demonic dragon controlled by Kalas was hunting down Tiamat's the 11 sons. That's right, the 11 sons of Tiamat were born from the Sea of Life again, and in terms of strength, they were even stronger than the previous 11. However, it was all in vain. One after another, the demonic beasts were killed by the 3-headed demonic dragon. Sun-like flames shot out from the sun lion's mouth and attacked the 3-headed demonic dragon. The pure white 3-headed demonic dragon threw away the corpse of the demonic beast that had died long ago. It then clawed at the fire of the sun, causing it to explode. Following that, the 3-headed demonic dragon gathered the flames and flashes that had once destroyed 1/3 of the world in its mouth and engulfed the lion. The sky had become dark at some point, and the storm carried a tornado that swept toward the 3-headed demonic dragon like a petrel. The 3-headed demonic dragon spread its shadow wings, which turned into a curtain that covered the sky and directly cut the tornado in half. However, the curtain did not stop. As if it had a life of its own, it directly slashed at the dark mass in the sky and instantly cut it in half. The last 2 demonic beasts, Ugger and Mdblutu, were eliminated. At this point, the 11 newborn demonic beasts were all killed by the 3-headed demonic dragon. However, when the 3-headed demonic dragon was eliminating the 11 sons, Tiamat was not idle. Another strange song was heard. Suddenly, the entire Sea of Life was in a riot as if it was boiling. In the next second, the 11 sons reappeared from the Sea of Life. No, not only 11 demonic beasts, but more and more demonic beasts emerged from the Sea of Life. Moreover, all of them had the same strength as the 11 sons. Without a doubt, this move was the product of the fusion of Tiamat and the black origin mud. It was impossible for Tiamat alone to give birth to so many powerful demonic beasts in such a short time. Among them, the most numerous and the most powerful was the winged Ramu. When Wuming controlled the 3-headed demonic dragon, he used the tyrant's halo to clean up the black origin mud on the land. At the same time, he also cleaned up the Ramu and the few mermaid kururu that were scattered all over the land. There were no longer any demonic beasts on the land, except for the sea. Any one of these demonic beasts had the strength to rival or even defeat goddesses such as Ishtar, Quizzard, and Ereshkigal. Looking at the number of demonic beasts, if all of them swarmed up, the entire Mesopotamia would probably be destroyed quickly. The Uruk's protective shield would definitely not be able to protect them. However, the 3-headed demonic dragon did not panic when it saw this scene. The chain wrapped around the right head extended and the tip of the chain gently scratched the huge dragon's body. PFFF. The 3-headed demonic dragon's body was sliced open like a hot knife through butter. A sizable wound was cut open, and fresh blood spilled out as if it was free of charge. The spilled blood did not fall into the sea of life. Instead, it turned into white figures with small shadow wings and flew into the air. They were miniature versions of Azidakaha. Azidakaha's innate ability was that its blood could turn into a two-headed dragon with god-level strength. This spiritual base was based on Azidakaha's body, so it naturally included this ability. Moreover, it was an upgraded version. The blood didn't transform into a two-headed dragon, but a miniature version of Azidakaha. Roar! The miniature versions of Azidakaha let out a huge roar that was different from their tiny bodies. They rushed towards the demonic beasts that were several times or even dozens of times larger than them. The huge demonic beasts that emerged from Tiamat's Sea of Life also met the miniature versions of Azidakaha. At this moment, the head in the middle of the three-headed demonic dragon seemed to come back to its senses and became energetic. Chapter 1032. Master, you're back. As soon as Wuming returned, Kalas relinquished control of the body to Wuming. I've come into contact with the illusory star Taisue's ability, and I can activate it at any time. As Wuming spoke, he observed the current battlefield and couldn't help but frown. The reason was naturally because of the current situation. Firstly, the number of magical beasts that Tiamat gave birth to shocked Wuming. Secondly, the three-headed dragon army couldn't defeat the magical beast army and was now retreating. As the number of winged Ramu was the highest, both sides were basically fighting in the air, and only a small number of them were fighting on the sea. Whether it was on the sea or in the sky, the three-headed dragon army was retreating. Couldn't be helped. In terms of individual strength, the magical beasts that Tiamat gave birth to were much stronger than the three-headed dragon formed from the three-headed dragon's blood. Even if these three-headed dragons could continue to divide their blood, each individual that was split was weaker than its superior individual. This was the main reason for the phenomenon of them retreating. Wuming immediately had the thought of, I can't delay any longer. Illusory star Taisui activate. Wuming didn't need to follow the rules to activate the simulated star map, so he only needed to shout or even think about it to activate it. The majestic voice from the three-headed dragon's body was transmitted to the void. All the three-headed dragons and magical beasts that were fighting to the death, including Tiamat, were stunned. The former was due to the deterrence of Wuming's voice, while the latter was purely due to fear. In the next second, a cluster of light that emitted a cosmic starlight emerged from the three-headed dragon's body. The petite size of the cluster of light created a sense of contrast with the three-headed dragon's huge body. However, the threat that the cluster of light brought to Tiamat was far greater than that of the three-headed dragon. A sound wave that was more powerful than before materialized and attacked the three-headed dragon. The three-headed dragon army and magical beast army that were in the path of the sound wave attack were all shattered into powder by the sound wave. Faced with Tiamat's move that was different from the past, Wuming became serious. The three-headed demon dragon opened its mouth, and a beam of light belonging to the tyrant's halo enveloped the incoming sound wave, instantly extinguishing the sound wave's follow-up attack. It was a flash of starlight, shot out from Tiamat's eyes of the stars, hidden behind the sound wave. It seemed that Tiamat was also anxious. Wuming didn't waste any more time and had Su Xing Tai Sui take action. You are no longer needed here, primordial goddess of creation. Leave this world that no longer belongs to you. In front of Wuming, Void Star Taisue's sphere of light fell into the sea of life, and Tiamat's enormous body stopped moving. Tiamat seemed to let out a final cry. In the next second, Tiamat's huge body turned into black mud and merged into the sea. The magical beasts that were born in the Sea of Life were also turned into black mud and fell into the sea. The dark clouds in the sky had already dispersed, and the sun had completely sunk into the west. Night had fallen. In the central region of Mesopotamia, in the fortress city of Uruk, it was nighttime. At this moment, a circle of lights surrounded the Uruk. The Uruk city was also brightly lit. People were celebrating. In order to celebrate the end of the world, Gilgamesh ordered the soldiers to set up a venue in the Uruk city, and even outside the Uruk city for people to dance, eat, and thank the gods. The reason why the venue was set up outside the Uruk city was because the Uruk city was not enough to accommodate everyone's celebration. After all the humans in the Mesopotamia region were gathered in the Uruk city at this time. In the current season, the night was not cold. In addition, the outside of the Uruk had been purified by the sea of black mud. The magical beasts had completely disappeared, and there was no need to worry about being attacked. In the Divine Tower, Gadotsi and the others gathered together to enjoy the fruits of victory after the end of the world. However, because the outside of the Uruk had been affected by the sea of black mud, there were very few pastures and farms, and there was a shortage of food. Only a few pastures and farms in the north of the Uruk were still intact. However, this did not change the fact that there was a shortage of resources. Therefore, Gadotsi and the others, as well as the Uruk people outside the Divine Tower, did not have much food to enjoy. The pastures and farms had to be reserved for grain, cattle, and sheep in order to prepare for the future life of the humans in Mesopotamia. Therefore, the people were just immersed in the atmosphere of surviving the disaster. At most, they would dance and eat very little. Of course, this included Gadotsi and the others. In the center of a large room in the Divine Tower, a large dining table was placed there. Gadotsi and the others sat around the table and tasted good wine. Although there was not much food, Gilgamesh could still provide drinks for Gadotsi and the others to drink freely. Of course, Gadotsi, Matthew, Mayu, and Anna were drinking drinks and not wine. The leopard man and Funbaba were playing in an open space at the side. Enkidu, who was worried about Funbaba, was paying attention to Funbaba while having a conversation with Gilgamesh that he had not had for many years. Although Gilgamesh was more or less not used to the fact that his close friend had a gender, a close friend was still a close friend. This would not change. Zhuge Kongming and Leonidas I sighed at the sweet and mellow taste of the wine in their hands. Nuakamaru, who was beside them, was drinking alone as if he was mourning for Musasobo Benkei. Quizzard and Ishtar clinked their glasses. Ishtar also poured a glass of wine for the absent-minded Ereshkigal, which gave Ereshkigal a fright. It was only after Mayu, who was beside her, said something to Ereshkigal that Ereshkigal calmed down. Matthew and Gadotsi gently tasted the drinks that Gilgamesh brought out. Gadotsi, who was beside Anna, was also tasting the delicious drink because of Merlin's harassment. She had to pretend that she did not care about the delicious drink. Everyone was immersed in the celebration dinner of Tiamat being defeated by Wuming, but because Wuming was not present, many people were more or less absent-minded. For example, Mayu, Ereshkigal, Anna, Gadotsi, and Matthew. However, Wuming was not dead, he was not there. What the hell is holding Assassin back? Gadotsi and Matthew chatted and complained softly. However, everyone present was a servant, and Gadotsi's soft complaint was equivalent to speaking directly in their ears. That I also want to know. After Ereshkigal spoke weakly, Mayu, who was beside her, looked a little shaken, and Anna's eyes also drifted. Gadotsi and Ereshkigal's questions attracted everyone's attention, except for the leopard man. Ishtar looked at Ereshkigal, who became absent-minded again, and shook her head helplessly. Didn't Golden Sparkle say that Hyunryong is now implementing the follow-up work on Tiamat on the coast of the Persian Gulf? He will be here in a while. You guys don't seem to see that guy. Did he take your souls away or something? Ishtar's criticism made Ereshkigal's face turn red. She naturally knew that Gilgamesh said that Wuming was on the Persian Gulf, but Wuming was not there. Not only her, but Gadotsi and the others also couldn't help but be absent-minded. And Ereshkigal had a feeling that Ishtar was actually worried about Wuming, but she didn't directly show it. Therefore, Ereshkigal and Ishtar quarreled again. Humph! What does it have to do with you that I care about him? You greedy goddess! Do you want to take away other people's thoughts? What did you say? You despicable guy? At that moment, Ishtar also became angry and stared at Ereshkigal. Seeing this, Gadotsi no longer expected to get any information from the sisters, and then turned to look at Enkidu. Seeing Gadotsi looking at him, Enkidu showed a warm smile to Gadotsi. Don't worry, Sir Wuming is indeed dealing with some aftermath matters. He will be back soon. On the coast of the Persian Gulf, Wu-Ming, who had already returned to his human form from the three-headed demonic dragon, was sitting on the collapsed observatory with a light ball in his hand. His eyes were closed as if he was immersed in it. The dragon horn headdress on his head was dutifully guarding Wu-Ming. Unfortunately, there was no danger around at this time. Chapter 1033. Ever since the void star Taisui sealed the entire sea of life that represented Tiamat, the Persian Gulf and even the Indian Ocean returned to their original ocean state. Other than the fact that no living creatures could be seen, the ocean at this moment was no different from before. After that, Wu-Ming also removed the three-headed demonic dragon state, but the spiritual base of human evil still existed. After all, the transformation of the spiritual base was basically complete, and it could not be changed back even if he wanted to. However, there was one thing to note. Wu-Ming could not recreate the three-headed demonic dragon's body with Enkidu and Kalas for the time being. After all, the three-headed demonic dragon's human evil spiritual base was only possible because of the blessings of Tiamat, the first Hassan, and Fanbaba, who had temporarily obtained the title of Crown Rider. Now that Tiamat was sealed, and the first Hassan had left after the crisis was over, the Crown Rider on Fanbaba had also disappeared. Naturally, the three-headed demonic dragon's form could not be maintained. In other words, it was already a miracle that Wu-Ming could still exist with this spiritual base at this moment. Now that the connection had collapsed, it should have been forced to leave this world. It could only be said that it was convenient to have someone at the top. The reason why Wu-Ming was sitting here was because the Void Star Taisui had sealed Tiamat's light ball. Because the spiritual base of Wu-Ming's human evil was still there, the Void Star Taisui would not disappear, and the sealed light ball would not dissipate. The reason why Wu-Ming was sitting here and sealing the light ball was actually that he was trying to take out the black mud that had fused with the Sea of Life. After all, the existence that had fused with the black mud would naturally be hostile to Wu-Ming, and Wu-Ming could not sit idly by and do nothing about the black mud. In addition, the foundation of human evil was the love for other humans. No matter what, Wu-Ming still had sympathy for Tiamat, especially after Wu-Ming studied the light ball and came into contact with Tiamat's will for a while. It really makes people sigh. Wu-Ming opened his eyes and let out a long sigh. He had no way of completely removing the black soil from Tiamat's Sea of Life. This could only be done after he returned to the Great Origin. During this time, Wu-Ming felt Tiamat's thoughts. I miss the children. I want to come into contact with the children. I want the children to return to my arms, but I'm afraid of bringing harm to the children. This was Tiamat's extremely simple thinking. Wu-Ming could use his origin power to kill Tiamat the same way he had killed Aziz-Dakaha, but Wu-Ming couldn't bring himself to do it. Aziz-Dakaha's evil was because he wanted justice to stand on his corpse, while Tiamat's evil was simply a mother's instinct to care for her child who had abandoned her, as well as the world that did not need her. And this mother was also afraid that she would harm her child. Otherwise, she would not have placed a self-seal on herself. Tiamat had only been chosen to become a bug in the human system. This bug had to be fixed in order for the system called humans to continue. And this bug had been created by using the love for humans. Fixing the false love that had been forced to become was a little cruel in Wu-Ming's eyes. Aziz-Dakaha had already died at Wu-Ming's hands. Wu-Ming did not want another existence similar to Aziz-Dakaha to follow in his footsteps. However, it was obviously impossible to let Tiamat go just like that. Fortunately, I have the illusory star Taisui. If not for this, I'm afraid it would have reached a point where only one of us could live. Ignoring all conditions to seal a natural god, although the target audience was small, the effect was unexpectedly powerful. If not for this, it was hard to say who would die in the end. Wu-Ming felt a headache at the thought of so many powerful magical beasts that had been born from the Sea of Life. And fortunately, those magical beasts were formed from the black soil in the Sea of Life. They were also a part of Tiamat. Otherwise, Wu-Ming would not have a good way to deal with so many magical beasts at once. And if the time was delayed, who knew how many magical beasts Tiamat could give birth to? The Sea of Life was so big, and Tiamat had the support of the black soil. Who knew what would happen in the end? Therefore, this was why Wuming believed that the outcome was still uncertain. In any case, let's bring Tiamat back to the root of life first. Once they returned to the root of life, there would definitely be a way. After all, the root of life was the source of miracles, and Wuming was a god inside. Wuming shook his head and rested for a while. After relieving his fatigue, he merged the ball of light into his body and stood up. Wuming looked at the position of the stars in the sky and estimated the time. At this time, Tachika and the others probably haven't finished their banquet. I should still be able to make it, probably. If not for the last 2 words. But Wuming knew that the Uruk was short of resources at the moment, so he did not expect to be able to eat delicious food. Let's go join in the fun. Wuming turned around, and his body disappeared into the portal that had opened at some point in time. Then the portal closed. On the coast of the Persian Gulf, there was only the night wind blowing the waves and hitting the rocks in boredom. Uruk. Although the Uruk was still brightly lit, most people had collapsed on the ground. Don't get me wrong, they were asleep. They reeked of alcohol, and even some children were no exception. But only a few children reeked of alcohol. This was the scene that Wuming sensed when he walked out of the portal that appeared in the sky. Gil really put in a lot of effort this time. I'm afraid the Uruk has run out of alcohol. Alcohol could not replace food, and the people who listened to the king did not drink because of the influence of the apocalypse. So, there was still a lot of alcohol left in the Uruk. There was not much food, so they drank, sang, and danced. This was how the Uruk citizens celebrated tonight. And because the tense minds were relaxed, there were many people who had fallen asleep in and out of the brightly lit Uruk. By the way, most children just fell asleep after relaxing their minds. There were not many children who secretly drank. Although this era was thousands of years away from the modern era, Gilgamesh still protected the children well. After all, children were the future of mankind. No longer paying attention to the scene inside and outside the Uruk, Wuming flew straight to the God Tower. Anyway, the night was not cold in this season, and there were no beasts outside. Let them sleep. At most, they would have a stiff neck because of the wrong sleeping posture when they woke up the next day. After entering the God Tower, Wuming went directly to the room where Gadotsi and the others held the banquet. In the corridor near the door, Wuming met Siduri. Siduri, haven't you gone to rest yet? When Gilgamesh was slacking, Siduri was the manager. After all, the Uruk citizens couldn't hold a banquet without a manager. Otherwise, it would really be chaotic. Seeing that it was Wuming, Siduri bowed first. I'm not tired, Master Hyunryong. Have you finished your work? As an insider, Siduri naturally knew from Gilgamesh and Enkidu that Wuming had something to do in the Persian Gulf and hadn't returned yet. Yes, I finished my work. I came back to see if I can make it in time for the banquet. Immediately, Siduri smiled. You're late. Master Hyunryong, Master Ishtar, and the others have all left. Miss Tachika and Miss Matthew are also asleep at the table. I just met Master Enkidu and asked me to send a towel over. Siduri said and raised a piece of white cloth in her hand. It was a wool towel that could be used to cover the body. Even if it was not cold at night, Enkidu was still very caring. Wuming nodded as if he understood, then reached out and took the towel in Siduri's hand. Then I'll send it over. Ignoring Ishtar and the other goddesses and Enkidu, he was going to see Gadotsi and Matthew first. Oh right, Siduri, go and rest now. Immediately, this is the will of the gods. After Wuming finished speaking, he directly left. In response, Siduri smiled. Master Hyunryong is really just like Master Enkidu, gentle. Chapter 1034. Wuming had seen how hard Siduri had worked during this period of time. She was not much more relaxed than Gilgamesh. At this time, how could Wuming allow Siduri to continue working? However, with Siduri's character, it was certainly impossible for her to rest by herself. So Wuming could only order her. He walked quietly into the room where Gadotsi and others were gathered. At this moment, the room was exuding the aroma of good wine. There was no doubt that this was Gilgamesh's collection of good wine. Wu-ming even suspected at this moment that Gadotsi and others fell asleep because of the smell of wine. As soon as he entered the room, Wu-ming saw Gadotsi and Matthew sleeping soundly on the table. The others were nowhere to be seen. Ishtar and the others must have left on their own, and someone like Leonidas I, who got drunk easily, must have been carried away by them. In addition to Gadotsi and Matthew, who were lying on the table, Gilgamesh was looking at the brightly lit Uruk by the window with his hands on his chest. "Oh, Hyun-ryong, you're finally here." Gilgamesh looked back at Wu-ming. "I thought I could make it in time for the banquet, but it seems that I'm late." He walked quietly to Gadotsi and Matthew, covered them with a thin towel, and then Wu-ming walked to Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh set up runes around Gadotsi and Matthew, so he didn't have to worry about disturbing Gadotsi and Matthew. There wasn't much food, but this king left some good wine for you. Gilgamesh showed a king's smile, and then golden ripples appeared from his body. 2 golden wine cups and a golden wine jug emerged from it. Gilgamesh held the golden wine jug, poured it into 2 golden goblets, and then threw one of them to Wu-ming. The wine cup flew lightly to Wu-ming as if it had a life of its own. Wu-ming didn't use much strength and easily caught it, then drank it in one gulp. "Although this wine is delicious, it's not to my taste." Wu-ming threw the empty wine cup away, and the golden wine cup turned into golden particles and dissipated. "This king is the same." Gilgamesh also drank it without caring about his image, and like Wu-ming, he threw the golden wine cup and golden wine jug aside, letting them turn into golden particles and return to the king's treasure. No matter how sweet the wine created by the gods is, it is still an existence that this king and humanity must abandon. This was the reason why it was not to his taste. Without responding to Gilgamesh's words, Wu-ming walked to Gilgamesh's side. With his back facing Gilgamesh, Wu-ming stood in front of the window and looked at the starry sky. "The Uruk people survived, and you are still alive. The Sumer dynasty can continue, and human civilization can continue." When Wu-ming took away Tiamat, who was sealed in the illusory star Taisui, this singularity would also be repaired and returned to the right track. What Wu-ming meant was that it was time for him to leave. After all, his purpose was to help Gadotsi and Matthew repair the singularity, and to make up for Wu-ming's regret of leaving Mesopotamia. Whether it was the Gilgamesh of that world or Wu-ming, who took care of Gilgamesh's childhood, was already half a father to Gilgamesh. "I know you won't forget what happened here, and I also know you know very well that the Gilgamesh I am familiar with is the queen. Although because of the suppression force, Uruk Hyun-ryong existed in every parallel world, and there was a story between Gilgamesh and Hyun-ryong, it was impossible for Gilgamesh not to notice this. After all, the stories created by different genders could not be exactly the same. This was for sure. Of course. Gilgamesh, who turned around, nodded without hesitation. After all, the Hyun-ryong this king is familiar with can be said to be a woman. You can't be the one this king is familiar with. Wu-ming was shocked. It must be the doing of the 2 suppression forces. Did it have to be so exciting? "Ha ha ha ha, this king is joking. It's so nice to see your face." Gilgamesh patted Hyun-ryong's shoulder as if his scheme succeeded, and he laughed very happily. However, not long after, Gilgamesh stopped laughing. "But this king is really happy to see you." After patting Wu-ming's shoulder again, Gilgamesh left the room. At this moment, only Wu-ming, who was looking at the night sky, and the sleeping Gadotsi and Matthew were left in the room. "Me too, Gil." As for what Gilgamesh said about Hyun-ryong in this parallel world being a woman, it was unknown whether Gilgamesh was joking or not. Early the next morning, Gadotsi woke up groggily and found herself lying on the bed in her and Matthew's room in the Chaldean embassy, and Matthew was lying next to her. "Hey? Hey hey hey." As if she thought of something terrible, Gadotsi's face turned red, and she screamed in horror. "What happened, Senior?" Matthew had a conditioned reflex because of Gadotsi's scream. He suddenly woke up from his sleep and sat up. "No, nothing. I just woke up and had a nightmare." Gadotsi was silently relieved. After all, she found that the clothes she was wearing did not change. It seemed that someone sent her and Matthew back here and put them directly on the bed. Suddenly, A voice came from the corner. "Are you awake, Tachika, Matthew?" Gudatsi and Matthew looked and found that it was Wu Ming. "Assassin? Did you send me and Matthew back?" Gudatsi guessed. Wu Ming, who was sitting cross-legged in the corner, nodded. "Seeing that you were sleeping soundly, I didn't wake you up. Instead, I sent you back here." Wu Ming pointed to the bed where Gudatsi and Matthew were, and then pointed to the corner where he was, and then continued to speak. "I didn't know where to go, so I just stayed. But don't worry, I didn't stare at your sleeping faces the whole night." Wu Ming smiled. However, the more Wu Ming said this, the more embarrassed Gudatsi and Matthew felt. Then, I'll go down first." Gudatsi immediately got up from the bed and walked out of the room. Senior Villo, I'm a little worried about you. I'll go downstairs and take a look." Then Matthew also left with a blushing face. In this regard, Wu Ming smiled. Gudatsi and Matthew were really quite cute. By the way, last night, Wu Ming did not stay because he had nowhere to go, nor did he stay to see Gudatsi and Matthew's sleeping faces. The reason why Wu Ming stayed in Gudatsi and Matthew's room was because Roman contacted Wu Ming through Gudatsi's bracelet last night. Chapter 1035. Last night, after Gilgamesh left, Wu Ming also left not long after. However, Wu Ming left with Gudatsi and Matthew. The method was simple. Whether it was using magic or mental power, Wu Ming could take the two away without waking them up. After returning to the Chaldean embassy, Wu Ming saw Merlin, who was secretly eating at the table on the first floor. After chatting with Merlin for a while, Wu Ming took Gudatsi and Matthew upstairs. By the time the two of them had settled down, it was already the latter half of the night. Just as Wu Ming was about to leave to find a place to rest, Gudatsi's wristband rang. "Hyunryong, no, the root dragon. I have something to talk to you about." Roman was someone who knew Wu Ming's true identity, and Wu Ming also knew Roman's true identity. And Roman came to Wu Ming so mysteriously at this time, and even addressed Wu Ming as the root dragon. It seemed that there was something big going on. Less than 20 employees of Chaldea have gone to rest. The director and her followers are still maintaining the Holy Grail and will not let Chaldea contact the outside world. Da Vinci has also returned to his workshop. Tachika and Matthew are also asleep. So, Roman came to contact Wu Ming when no one else was around. Obviously, he must have something important to say. "Are you feeling uneasy about the enemy who burned humanity?" Wu Ming asked casually. On Chaldea's side, Roman fell silent. It was obvious that he did not expect Wu Ming to tell the truth. It was not difficult to guess. Roman came to Wu Ming secretly because he did not want others to know. Only secrets must be kept. And there was indeed a secret between Roman and Wu Ming. That was, Wu Ming and Roman knew each other's true identities. And this involved the mastermind behind the burning of humanity. After all, Gydia and Roman were inextricably linked. So, Roman came to Wu Ming because of Gydia. No, to Roman, it was because of the mastermind behind the scenes, the fake Solomon. After all, Wu Ming did not tell Roman that the fake Solomon was the tactic Gydia created by Solomon. "I don't know why, but I keep feeling uneasy. I know you know the enemy's situation very well. Can you tell me?" Roman did not know the details of the enemy. Wu Ming did not tell him, and he only saw a hint of danger before he gave up his power. However, "I refuse." Wu Ming refused without thinking. "Wait a minute, why?" Even Roman could hear Wu Ming's perfunctory tone. "The reason is simple." Wu Ming found a stool and sat on the bed where Gudatsi and Matthew were. He chatted with Gudatsi's wristband. Although it was a little strange to chat with someone who was sleeping soundly. Anyway, there was magic on Gudatsi and Matthew. He did not have to worry about waking up Gudatsi and Matthew. "You're now a human, Roman Acheron. You're no longer any powerful existence. You don't have the ability to save everything. You've been like this since you became a human. You're just an ordinary medical staff." Wu Ming did not know if Roman had a trump card. Even if he did, it was uncertain whether it would be effective against Gydia, who had the black soil. And there was one more thing. Roman was a human at the moment, and he was a human who was not as good as Gaddafi. The matter of defeating the mastermind behind the scenes was not his responsibility. He was qualified to take back the future of mankind as a human. However, he could only do it as a human. As a human, he did not have the power to do it. This was the price he had to pay for giving up all his power to become a human, even if he had seen the crisis of mankind on the eve of giving up his power. In a sense, this was what he deserved. If it's you, you should understand one thing. Everyone has to admit the consequences of their decisions, whether the consequences are good or bad. So, you just have to be an honest medical staff. Roman, who heard this sentence, was sitting on a special sofa in Chaldea. He pressed one hand on the other hand as if he was touching something under the glove. Roman's expression was a little lonely. But, "That's enough from you, once King Solomon." Wu Ming instantly interrupted Roman's words and also revealed Roman's true identity. That's right, Roman was King Solomon. He was the follower of the former director, Marisbili Animusfia, who participated in the Winterwood Holy Grail War 10 years ago. After winning the Holy Grail War, he became an ordinary human by making a wish. On the eve of losing all his power and becoming a human, he used his clairvoyance to see the burning of humanity. However, because he was powerless, he could only desperately learn in an attempt to use the identity of a human to save the future. That was why he, the real one, thought that the guy who called himself Solomon was a fake. He was also almost suspected by Gaddafi and the others because he helped Solomon to explain. You want to be an ordinary person and also want to save the world. How can there be such a good thing in the world? I'm afraid you're a little whimsical. Wu Ming mocked mercilessly. Moreover, this is the result of your own choice. You can't regret it. You have to face it, and admit it. Don't worry about it and don't try to stop it. You have to know that if the sky falls, there are tall people to hold it up, and you're just an ordinary human now. After that, Roman's rather weak voice came from Gaddafi's bracelet. Didn't I say that if the sky falls, there are tall people to hold it up? What are you, an ordinary human, worrying about? Roman was frightened by Wu Ming's reprimand and didn't dare to speak. Wu Ming picked his ears as if he was bored. He spoke as if he made the final decision for Roman. In short, your mission is to help Tachika save humanity, heal Matthew's broken body, assist Olga Marie in managing Chaldea, and leave the rest to me. After all, Wu Ming was partly responsible for Gidea's mutation. He couldn't leave the black mud alone. He also had to take responsibility for what the black mud caused. However, the difference between Wu Ming and Roman was that Wu Ming had the ability to solve all of this, and Roman didn't have such ability. Actually, I just wanted to say that my trump card can't be called a trump card 100%. Plus, I don't know why, but I have a bad feeling, so I wanted to ask you to help me. Roman in Chaldea loosened his crossed hands and smiled awkwardly. Wu Ming, who was in a different time and space from Roman, narrowed his eyes helplessly. He looked like a dead fish. If I knew you were so open-minded, I wouldn't have wasted so much time talking to you. That was the meaning in Wu Ming's eyes. Therefore, Wu Ming with dead fish eyes found a corner and sat up, no longer paying attention to Roman. Only Roman's calls echoed in the room until he was almost discovered by the Chaldea personnel, who woke up in the night. As for Wu Ming, he sat there until daybreak. That was what happened last night. Wu Ming looked at the door where Gaddafi and Matthew left. Then he stood up and walked out. In fact, although Wu Ming and Roman's conversation was very casual, Wu Ming also had thoughts and speculations. Wu Ming believed that Gidea might have become stronger. Chapter 1036. Roman didn't know that the so-called mastermind behind the scenes was actually Gaia, the magic technique he had developed himself. However, the guy who claimed to be Solomon, who appeared at the London Singularity, was indeed himself. Therefore, in Roman's opinion, the enemy was likely to simply control his corpse and impersonate Solomon. Therefore, no matter how powerful Roman's trump card was, it could only target his controlled corpse and could not eliminate the mastermind behind the scenes. Therefore, Roman did not have much confidence in using his hidden means as a trump card. Under such circumstances, Roman even felt uneasy. This meant that his hidden means were probably useless, which was why he came to Wuming. Wuming had always believed in intuition, so he also had a certain degree of trust in the intuition of others. What did Roman's worry mean? Roman did not know who the enemy was, but Wuming knew very well. This meant that Gydia was likely to have gotten rid of the restrictions of Roman's hidden means, and there was no doubt that Gydia had become stronger. Although Wuming was not afraid of Gydia, this information was indispensable to Wuming. In short, he would deal with whatever came his way. He bid farewell to everyone first and returned to the route. Not long after, Wuming also went downstairs. After going downstairs, what entered Wuming's eyes was naturally the scene of Gadotsi and the others eating breakfast. At the rectangular table, Gadotsi and Matthew sat on one side, while Merlin and Anna sat on the other side. The four of them had a rather bland and small breakfast. This was made by Anna. Because there was not much food, it was bland and in small quantities. Wuming randomly found a seat and sat next to Anna. He did not know if Gadotsi and Matthew had recovered, but Wuming decided to sit opposite them. "You're about to leave. Why don't you have a good meal?" Wuming then joked. "Hee, the Uruk is quite short of food at the moment. Let's have breakfast as a memento." Gadotsi answered Wuming with a smile, as if she was not the one blushing earlier. "I'm a little reluctant," Matthew said softly. However, Matthew's face was still slightly red. It seemed that Matthew's skin was not as thick as Gadotsi's. After all, we're integrated into the Uruk city. Merlin took a sip of the clear soup and smacked his lips. "TSK, TSK. It seems that I can't live without Uruk food? Ha 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 ha." Even if it was bland, the taste of Uruk had left a mark on Merlin's taste buds in the past 6 months. As expected of Merlin. Anna glanced at Merlin and sneered in a cold voice. "After all, it's me." However, Merlin seemed to have received some kind of praise and was quite pleased. Well, who could be more thick-skinned than Merlin? "Anna, are you okay?" Wuming, who had chosen to ignore Merlin, suddenly asked Anna beside him. When he chatted with Merlin last night, Wuming learned from Merlin that Anna had used the power of the Holy Grail to transform into Gorgon. Together with Ereshkigal, they had dealt with the 5 powerful demonic beasts that attacked the Uruk. Although Anna had now recovered her body, he was still worried about Anna's Wuming, so he decided to ask. "I'm fine." Anna shook her head. Although Sakura Madu was in the Holy Grail that Wuming gave to Anna, the function of the Holy Grail still existed. Using the power of the Holy Grail to transform into Gorgon and then using the power of the Holy Grail to recover, it would not affect Anna, nor would it cause any harm to Sakura Madu in the Holy Grail. Anna put down the bowl and then took out a golden crystal from her arms. "I'll give this back to you." After Anna used the Holy Grail, it became like this, but Sakura Madu was still inside. "I'm a servant. I can't bring her back." That was the reason why Anna returned the Holy Grail to Wuming. "I know. I will bring Sakura Madu back to her time." Wuming nodded and put away the crystal. "By the way, assassin, what happened to the Holy Grail in Tiamat's body?" The Holy Grail that disturbed this time was in Tiamat's body, and at this time Tiamat was defeated by Wuming, so it was reasonable to say that the Holy Grail should have appeared. Matthew's face was also red. He had also forgotten about the Holy Grail. The celebration and fatigue caused everyone to not care about the whereabouts of the Holy Grail. Gadotsi only remembered this matter when she saw Anna return the Holy Grail that Wuming gave her to Wuming. "I sealed the Holy Grail and Tiamat together," Wuming said, and with one hand, a cluster of light appeared in Wuming's hand. These were the seals formed by the virtual star Taisui. "Later, I will take away Tiamat's seal along with the Holy Grail. I can't give it to you for the time being." Wuming turned his hand again, and the virtual star Taisui that sealed Tiamat disappeared. "This doesn't matter. We have reverse detected the location of the final enemy through the existence that tried to invade Chaldea." Roman's voice came from Gadotsi's wrist. The use of the Holy Grail in Chaldea was basically to analyze and find the person who made it. When Wuming stored the Holy Grail that sealed Floros in Chaldea, Chaldea was almost invaded because of it. However, it was a blessing in disguise. Chaldea unexpectedly located the location of the enemy through reverse search, so there was no need for the Holy Grail. How about this, Roman? I will go explore first. Tachika will stay in Chaldea for now. Why? Gudatsi looked at Wuming in confusion. She had passed through all 7 singularities, so why did she need to be so careful when facing the final enemy? Moreover, Gudatsi couldn't bear to see Wuming in danger alone. Similarly, Matthew couldn't do it either. Senior Villo, I think it's better for us to go with you. Little Eggplant was rarely serious. However, Wuming smiled. You've misunderstood. I just need to verify something. If I go with you, I'm afraid I'll hurt you. Both Gurgle and Mashu nodded their heads as if they suddenly understood. With Wuming's powerful strength, it was very likely that he would hurt his allies. However, Roman and Leonardo da Vinci in Chaldea noticed something. How could a strong person like Wuming accidentally hurt his allies? It was obvious that Wuming didn't want Gudatsi to be in danger. But in the end, Roman agreed with Wuming's decision. All right then. Tachika and Matthew will go back to their rooms to rest after returning to Chaldea. We'll wait for Hyunryong's notice before we act. No matter what, Gudatsi wasn't as powerful as Wuming. She was just an ordinary person. If something happened to her, it would be over. Wuming nodded. After you finish eating, we'll go to the Divine Tower to bid farewell to Gil and the rest. At the same time, Wuming also freeloaded a meal. Chapter 1037. At the bottom of the tower, Wuming, Gudatsi, Matthew, Merlin, Anna, Mayu and Ereshkigal came together. The reason why Mayu and Ereshkigal came with Wuming and the others was that when everyone was in the middle of breakfast, Mayu came to the Chaldean embassy with an embarrassed look on her face. Mayu just came to Wuming, and the reason why she took Ereshkigal with her was to repay Ereshkigal for staying the night last night. She took Ereshkigal shopping with her. That's right, Wuming came back late last night, and when everyone finished the banquet, Mayu left with Ereshkigal. After knowing that Mayu was Wuming's sister, Ereshkigal was quite serious about building a small house for Mayu in the underworld. By the way, because Mayu was a servant at the moment, the underworld would not cause any harm to Mayu. Last night, Mayu and Ereshkigal slept in the underworld. At the bottom of the tower, the soldiers who went to report to Gilgamesh returned and invited everyone to enter the tower. Wuming and Mayu walked in the end because Wuming and Mayu whispered to each other. Mayu, I didn't take good care of you. How did you sleep last night? Wuming held Mayu's hand with an apologetic look on his face. First, he tried to remove the black mud that fused with Tiamat. After that, he talked to Gilgamesh and sent Gudatsi and Matthew back to the Chaldean embassy. After that, he discussed with Roman. After that, he thought about the clarity from Roman's words. After all these things were done, the sky was almost bright. Sister L is very good to me. You don't have to worry about me, Brother Wuming, and I'm not an insensible child. Feeling the warmth of Wuming's palm, Mayu responded to Wuming with a warm smile, indicating that she understood him. Wuming couldn't help but sigh. He suddenly remembered Mayu's problem when he was eating. Fortunately, Mayu could find him by herself. However, it was still thanks to Ereshkigal. I have to thank her later, Wuming thought as he watched Ereshkigal's back. Ereshkigal, who noticed that someone was watching her, couldn't help but blush, and her body became stiff. Ereshkigal knew who was looking at her. Only Wuming and Mayu were behind her. It was not intentional. As if it was a coincidence, Gudatsi, Matthew, Anna, and Merlin took the lead, and Wuming and Mayu deliberately stayed behind, so Ereshkigal could only be in this position. Thank you for taking care of Mayu. Wuming, who walked quickly to Ereshkigal's side, thanked her. As for this name, it was a simplification of Ereshkigal. After all, Ereshkigal was a bit too long. No, it's nothing. Ereshkigal talked about her hair and waved her hand generously. Of course, it would be better if she didn't speak so nervously. You now have my divinity. The underworld can no longer restrict you. For the next period of time, you can live well on this land. This was both Wuming's gratitude to Ereshkigal and Wuming's sympathy for Ereshkigal's past. Yes, you are leaving soon. Ereshkigal, who was originally nervous, suddenly became lonely. This was the tragedy brought about by time travel. The two sides were not of the same era, and they had to be separated in the end. Humans basically prohibited or restricted the technology of time travel. This was also one of the reasons. Ereshkigal sped up and distanced herself from Wuming and Mayu. Brother Wuming, can't we meet Sister El again? At this moment, Mayu also seemed a little unhappy. Children were very emotional, especially little girls. Although Mayu had experienced life and death, it did not mean that she had adapted to it. On the contrary, Mayu was more sensitive to such things. In addition, Ereshkigal's temper and personality were very suitable for Mayu's liking. Mayu was familiar with her face, so the two got along well in this short time. For Mayu's question, Wuming smiled casually. How is it possible? When everything is solved, we can come to see your sister El again. We can even bring her to live in the modern world. For humans, time travel was a dangerous function that needed to be restricted or prohibited, but for Wuming, it was something that could be done casually. Really? That's great, Brother Wuming. Mayu recovered again. Seeing Mayu become emotional, Wuming touched Mayu's head with some emotion. You have changed a lot during the time I was not around you. It seems that the contact with Ilya and others has made Mayu grow stronger. Really? Mayu herself was unaware of it. You are cuter than before? After Wuming said jokingly. He directly picked up Mayu and put her on his shoulder. Later, in Mayu's shy exclamation, Wuming dragged Mayu, who was riding on his neck, and followed most of the people in front. God's tower between the thrones, where Gilgamesh dealt with government affairs. At this moment, the servants and gods gathered together, and unrelated people such as soldiers were ordered to leave the room by Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand and looked at the people gathered below with a smile on his face. By the way, at this time, Wuming had put Mayu down from his shoulder. Is it finally time to say goodbye, everyone? Gilgamesh first glanced at the servants he summoned, and now only Nuakamaru, Zhuge Kongming, Leonidas I, and Merlin were left. Then Gilgamesh looked at Ishtar, Quetzalcoatl, Ereshkigal, and Anna standing in the corner. In a sense, the three goddesses' alliance finally stood on the side of humans. Later, Gilgamesh looked at Wuming and Enkidu standing together, and Wuming's sister in modern times. His sister aside, Wuming and Enkidu would certainly not stay here. They had their own things to do. Ignoring the leopard man and Funbaba, who were hiding and playing, Gilgamesh finally looked at Gadotsi and Matthew. The last master of mankind, Tachika Fujimaru, and her servant Matthew Gilead, this king has seen your performance during this time in Uruk. Although you are still very weak, this king believes that even without the help of Hyunryong and others, you can still save this era. Gilgamesh's praise made Gadotsi and Matthew quite happy. After such a long time of contact and communication, Gadotsi and Matthew were no longer afraid of Gilgamesh. They now sincerely admired this most ancient king. King Gilgamesh, thank you and everyone for taking care of us during this time. We will not forget you. This was a farewell. Gadotsi didn't just look at Gilgamesh. She also looked at everyone around her. Tachika, especially me, you have to remember me well. Quizzard came to Gadotsi and hugged Gadotsi, making Matthew panic. And me, don't forget the great leopard man. No one knew when the leopard man ran over and joined in the fun. You are a master. Maybe you can summon us as servants to your side. Ereshkigal's tone was quite serious. Humph. Although you can't summon us deity-level servants, that's all that matters, Ishtar said mercilessly with his arms crossed. Goodbye, everyone. Anna's farewell was quite concise. In Anna's view, even if a human master couldn't summon god-level servants, there was still a chance to meet them. Lord Fujimaru, you can try to summon me next time. I will kill all your enemies for you. Nuakamaru seemed to have walked out of the shadow of sadness, worthy of being a warrior. Me too. But remember to exercise your muscles often. At the last moment, Leonidas I took off his helmet. Exercise of the mind is the most important thing. Zhuge Kongming interjected. However, as Ryder said, we are not God-level servants. You can try to use the fate left by your contact with us during this period of time to summon us. Zhuge Kongming took out a cigar from his pocket and lit it. I know everyone. In short, I will try to summon you, Gudatsi said after getting rid of her big sister's hug. By the way, since this era is safe, will the servants stay? Matthew thought about it. When Hyunryong takes Tiamat and the Holy Grail away, the servants will disappear one after another. At most, only the God-level servants will be able to hold on for a while. Merlin explained. In the end, Wuming also walked in front of Gudatsi and Matthew. Listen to Roman first. When you return to Chaldea, go to your personal room and rest. When I need you, I will use my means to inform Chaldea. I look forward to fighting side by side with you next time. Tachika, Matthew. Finally, after Enkidu also said goodbye to Gudatsi and Matthew, Gilgamesh spoke again. In this era, the Mesopotamia of BC has been saved by Chaldea. Now, this king orders you to leave here, go to the last singularity, and destroy the final enemy. Romani. Roman, who was in Chaldea, heard Gilgamesh's last call. After responding, he immediately began to transfer Gudatsi and Matthew's ray shift. Tachika, Matthew, the ray shift has begun. Get ready. Yes, doctor. In the next second, the two's body began to glow, blue particles of light. Fu! Fu! Fufu suddenly ran out from the corner when the two were about to leave, followed by Fanbaba, who was interested in Fufu. After that, Fufu jumped into Matthew's arms. Fufu? Matthew almost forgot about Fufu. Where did Fufu go? Gudatsi lamented Fufu's powerful hide-and-seek ability. Everyone, goodbye. Gudatsi waved to everyone, and Gudatsi, Matthew, and Fufu turned into blue particles and dissipated. After witnessing Gudatsi and Matthew's ray shift, Wuming looked at Enkidu and Meiyu, who were hugging Fanbaba. We should also go. Chapter 1038. Inside the origin that looked like a starry sky, on the platform formed in the center, the huge and magnificent white origin dragon opened its eyes and woke up from its slumber. The first thing it did when it woke up from its slumber was to open a virtual screen in the void. The scene on it was an elementary school in a certain world. Wuming, who was in the origin, had the ability to see what was happening in a certain world. Sui Kun Original Academy Elementary School, where Meiyu and Ilya went to school. Before Wuming left, he brought Meiyu, Ilya, and the others back to Ilya's world. In any case, Meiyu had settled down in Ilya's world and went to school. Wuming wouldn't do such a cruel thing as separating Meiyu and her friends. However, because of the Ainsworth family's technology and the method of crossing between two worlds taught by Wuming, Shiro and the others could go to Meiyu's world to visit Meiyu at any time. On the screen, Meiyu was chatting with Ilya and other friends. But then, Meiyu froze for a moment, and then as if waking up from a dream, she fell into a trance. It seemed that Meiyu had received the memory of herself turning into a servant and going to BC. Although it didn't matter if she couldn't receive it, Meiyu's servant body was also Meiyu. Wuming didn't want anything to happen to Meiyu's clone. The heroic spirits in the Valhalla couldn't accept all the memories of the clone, but Meiyu wasn't a heroic spirit, so she could definitely receive those memories. Only when Meiyu's main body received the memories and information of the clone could it prove that the clone had returned safely. Now it seemed that Meiyu had indeed received it, and Wuming was relieved. Meiyu's trance scared Ilya. Seeing Ilya nervously wanting to pull Meiyu to the infirmary, Wuming couldn't help but laugh. Ilya is still so rash. But to Wuming's surprise, he saw an equally nervous Erica on the screen. It was very likely that Julian had used the Ainsworth family's technology to send Erica to this world and arranged for her to attend school with Meiyu and Ilya. In this regard, Wuming wasn't worried at all. Julian was probably just thinking about his sister and wanted Erica to experience the life of a normal person. Julian was like an elder brother now. With a thought, the virtual screen disappeared. After all, Wu-ming only wanted to check on Mayo's condition and nothing else. Next, it's Tiamat, Wu-ming said. With a thought, a ball of light exuding the light of the universe appeared in front of Wu-ming. This was the illusory star Taisui that sealed Tiamat. Let's begin. As if God had said, let there be light, the illusory star Taisui was unsealed under the command of God of the origin. Countless black mud rushed out and fell into the origin. In the next second, the entire space of the origin seemed to have come alive and eliminated the black mud at the root. The black mud, which was originally like a river bursting out of a dam, shrank again and quickly disappeared. In the end, only a little bit was left. This was Tiamat's black mud, her sea of life. The black mud that existed in it had all been treated as a virus by the origin and cleaned up by the origin. Immediately afterward, Wu-ming's huge dragon claw gently tapped the sea of life, and a figure immediately separated from the sea of life. It was the spiritual base of a servant. It was Musasobo Benkei. After being assimilated by Tiamat's sea of life, there was no way to remove it. This was what Ishtar had said, and it was also publicly known. However, in the origin, Wu-ming could easily separate Musasobo Benkei's spiritual base from the sea of life. Wu-ming's dragon claw gently tapped Musasobo Benkei's spiritual base, and a ripple appeared behind Musasobo Benkei, enveloping Musasobo Benkei. The ripple then disappeared. Wu-ming sent Musasobo Benkei back to Uruk, where he would meet with Nuakamaru and the others for a short time. Then, because of the disappearance of the Holy Grail, they would dissipate together and return to the Martyr's Palace. Musasobo Benkei's matter was taken care of. Then there was Tiamat's problem. Wu-ming lowered his red eyes and looked at the pink and somewhat cute starry eyes. In the end, the sea of life turned into Tiamat, but in human form. Tiamat in human form was no different from a normal woman. In fact, her face and figure could even be considered to be of the highest quality in human aesthetics. At this moment, Tiamat in human form was like a human girl. She sat on the ground like a duck with her legs pressed together as much as possible and looked up at Wu-ming. She had a petite body and 2 arms and 2 legs, but she was almost naked. Only some scales and animal skin covered certain parts of Tiamat's body. There was a pair of huge twisted horns on her head, which were almost identical to the horns on Tiamat's head in dragon form. In human form, Tiamat's mouth didn't split open all the way to the back of her head, but her teeth were also serrated. The only thing that satisfied Wu-ming was her starry eyes. Couldn't be helped. Those starry eyes, together with Tiamat's current appearance, were simply too cute. I really don't know how those gods were able to do it back then. Wu-ming couldn't help but ridicule. Then, Wu-ming's huge dragon body changed, and Wu-ming's dragon body turned into human form. After all, Tiamat was very petite at this moment, and it wasn't easy to talk with her huge body. After landing on the platform, Wu-ming walked in front of Tiamat. Looking at Tiamat, who stared at him motionlessly, Wu-ming didn't know what to say. He simply sat down facing Tiamat, crossed his arms, and thought silently. If he sent her back as a human evil, she would definitely be destroyed in the end. Wu-ming definitely wouldn't do that. Should he send her to another world? If it was another world, he didn't know if Tiamat's human evil ability would still work. Let's give it a try. If it didn't work, he would take her back and think about it at length. However, just as Wu-ming was thinking, Tiamat moved. Tiamat leaned forward slightly, stretched out her hands, and hugged Wu-ming's head. Then, while Wu-ming was in a daze, Tiamat put Wu-ming down. Then, she placed Wu-ming's head comfortably on her lap. Obviously, it was a knee pillow. Wu-ming didn't react at all. Or rather, Wu-ming was dumbfounded. Although the black mud was removed, Wu-ming also thought that Tiamat might attack him. However, he didn't think that Tiamat would give him a knee pillow. This was too ridiculous. Wu-ming couldn't believe it at all. However, it was quite comfortable. "Child, my child." A delicate and ethereal voice came out of Tiamat's mouth. Wu-ming had some guesses about this. Tiamat's desire for children led her to treat Wu-ming as her own child, and the knee pillow was just a way for Tiamat to love her child. However, the one she should love wasn't herself. She should love someone else. Shaoan, come out for a second. Wuming swung his hand and threw out the golden chain wrapped around his arm. The chain turned into a beautiful green-haired person, Enkidu. Lord Hyunryong, do you want me to replace you? Enkidu smiled bitterly. She wasn't stupid, and she had been watching from the side. How could she not understand Wuming's meaning? Just call me Wuming at this time. We're not in Uruk anymore. Wuming corrected her. Yes, Lord Wuming. Then Wuming nodded. Also, you're right. Come and enjoy Mother's love for me. Ever since Enkidu came out, Tiamat had noticed her. Enkidu smiled bitterly again and walked to Tiamat's side. Then, without a doubt, she was also put down and laid on Tiamat's knee pillow. Chapter 1039. The current Enkidu was Enkidu after fusing with Kingu, so Enkidu could be considered Tiamat's son. That was why Wuming wanted to let Enkidu enjoy this motherly love on his behalf. However, why do I have to continue resting on my knees? Wuming tilted his head and body as if he was resting on a pillow. There's no other way, Lord Wuming. It's probably because you're also Mother's son. Enkidu, who was also leaning on his knees, was facing Wuming with a smile of schadenfreude on his face. Indeed, Hyunryong's rumors mentioned that Hyunryong was Tiamat's son, and that Ulidim and the other magical beasts called Wuming Ramu. The connection must have been made. However, Wuming was not Tiamat's son. Even if it was fabricated, it should not affect Tiamat. Why would she really treat Wuming as her son? Although this knee pillow is quite comfortable, I still have things to do. After all, Wuming was going to find Gydia to solve everything. What was the point of resting on her knees? Tiamat seemed to have heard Wuming's words. She muttered and stroked Wuming's cheek. Child, my child. Then, Tiamat moved Wuming's head away from her knee pillow. Wuming took the opportunity to sit up and looked deeply at Tiamat. He did not expect Tiamat to be so understanding. It seemed that she was still thinking about her child. How about, I raise her as a stepmother? Wuming had this idea. Hearing those words, Tiamat's starry eyes involuntarily lit up. She appeared to be very happy. Lord Wuming, Mother is probably happy that you've acknowledged her as your mother. Enkidu understood Tiamat. She could tell that Tiamat was very happy. As she spoke, Enkidu tried to sit up. However, Tiamat pressed down on Enkidu's head and stroked it. Wuming smiled helplessly. It was not a big deal to have a mother out of nowhere. It was better to have a long-term plan. However, Wuming did not directly reject this idea. Let's not talk about my matters for now. I'll have to trouble you to stay here and enjoy the motherly love for me. Similarly, Wuming also stroked Enkidu's head. Then I'll have Kalas follow you. If you don't bring me along, I'll be worried. Enkidu's face was slightly red, but she was very serious. I'll always be with Master. Kalas on Wuming's head made her presence felt. My backup machine is also close to perfection. I can guard the great source on my own. Then, Wuming turned his head and looked into the void. In the next second, little Wuming number 1's backup machine suddenly appeared out of thin air. Then, the backup machine steadily walked to Wuming's side and laid down on the platform. Once an external entity attempted to enter or attack the great source, Wuming's backup machine would be able to defend against it. Using an analogy, the great source was the home, and Wuming's backup machine was the AI butler. After Wuming activated the backup machine, his body suddenly transformed into a gigantic great source dragon. Then, I'll be leaving. In the next second, the dragon flew to the side and disappeared as if it had fallen into an illusion. Go early. Come back early. Tiamat waved her hand stutteringly at the direction where Wuming disappeared, looking very much like a mother sending her son off. Looking at Tiamat like this, Enkidu was a little jealous. You love your child so much. Why did you abandon Kingu? Enkidu and Kingu fused at the Mesopotamia singularity. Tiamat's abandonment of Kingu was naturally engraved in Enkidu's mind. No, that... Tiamat stuttered as she explained. Enkidu's eyes lit up when he realized that there might be something behind the scenes. He quietly listened to Tiamat. Tiamat also stuttered as she explained. However, because of her stuttering, it would probably take a while. Between the worlds. In a large world filled with scenes of the universe, huge transparent spheres floated there one after another, like stars in the universe. These huge spheres were worlds. At some point, a huge white figure suddenly appeared. It was Wu Ming in his dragon form. No matter how many times I come, this scene always amazes me. Wu Ming's huge dragon eyes flashed with the light of the universe. Worlds existed in this way, and Wu Ming was very interested in this phenomenon. Let's take a good look around. After all, traveling between worlds was a wonderful thing. Following this, Wu Ming flew in a certain direction. Wu Ming had gone to find Gidia last time, so he naturally remembered the route. However, even if he did not remember, Wu Ming could still find Gidia by relying on the attraction of their origin powers. Not only had Gidia become stronger, but so had Wu Ming. In other words, as long as he stayed in the Great Origin, Wu Ming would continue to grow stronger. In addition, Wu Ming's body had experienced many years in the box world, and the passage of time had become the best catalyst for Wu Ming to become stronger. However, the origin dragon before and after reaching adulthood were two different existences. The difference was like the difference between an ant and a dragon. As an existence who was only one step away from becoming an adult origin dragon, Wu Ming could sense this. In fact, it was best for Wu Ming to wait until he reached adulthood before finding and killing Gidia. That was the safest way. However, time waited for no one. Who knew if Gidia had comprehended something from the Black Origin Mud, or if he had analyzed the power of the Black Origin Mud? And most importantly, Gidia must have had something to do when he burned the human essences, and Wu Ming had to stop him. Now, it was too late for Wu Ming to figure out how to cross that step and reach adulthood. As mentioned before, the adulthood of the origin dragon wasn't something that could be achieved with time alone. As for how to do it, Wu Ming didn't know, so Wu Ming needed time to figure it out. For example, Wu Ming was like a prince who had been stranded in the world. He relied on his own efforts to return to his country, but after finding the palace with great difficulty, he wanted to find the royal family to learn how to become stronger, only to find that the royal family was all dead, and there was no way to find anyone to learn how to become stronger. However, if Wu Ming could stay in the palace for a while longer, he might be able to find a way to become stronger. But this required time, and Wu Ming didn't have time. I'm already very strong now. Even if Gidia completely grasps the secret of the Black Origin Mud, he can only tie with me at best. This was Wu Ming's worst-case scenario. Wu Ming had experienced a lot since the last time he fought Gidia. If Wu Ming encountered Gidia at the same level as last time, he would definitely be able to crush him. However, Wu Ming also knew that Gidia had also become stronger. Even so, Wu Ming was still not afraid. If something really happens, I'll just run back to the origin and hide. Yes, Wu Ming's idea was very simple. If Gidia's strength exceeded his expectations, Wu Ming would run back to the origin and hide. In any case, the origin dragon in the origin was like a tiger in the forest or a flood dragon in the sea. Wu Ming was a god in the origin. However, it wasn't very likely that it would come to that. Let's hurry up and settle everything. With that, Wu Ming sped up and disappeared. Chapter 1040. Between the worlds, in a certain place filled with the scenery of the universe, there was a small independent world that had separated itself from the original world. At a closer look, it seemed to be a group of open-air platforms of various shapes and colors. There was a spotlessly white platform that was larger than the other platforms. At the same time, it was located on top of the other platforms. The other platforms revolved around this platform that was much taller than them, like stars surrounding the moon. On this spotlessly white platform, there was a spotlessly white jade seat in the center. If it wasn't for the dark universe with specks of starlight as the background, but instead the blue sky and white clouds, this place would probably be a beautiful scenery. However, the spotlessly white jade seat contrasted with the cosmic-like background between the platform and the world, making it stand out and rather eye-catching. On the jade seat on the platform, there was a humanoid existence that was much taller than ordinary humans, sitting upright on the jade seat. He seemed to be the master of this independent small world. He was Gidia, the existence that had impersonated King Solomon and commanded the 72 demon god pillars, the demon god King Gidia. At this moment, he seemed to be waiting for someone. Not long after, a spotlessly white figure flew over from the cosmic-like sky. It was Wu Ming in his dragon form. "You seem to be waiting for me." Wu Ming's voice came from the mouth of the origin dragon. Unlike his original rough voice, Wu Ming's voice did not change when he was in his dragon form. "Because I knew you would come looking for me." Gidia's voice was as rough as ever. "Then do you know that today is the day you die, Gidia?" Wu Ming opened his huge dragon mouth, gathering white flames that contained the power of origin. Then he instantly shot it out. This was a killing move filled with power. Rumble! The sound of something huge moving was heard. Countless vines appeared out of nowhere, forming a net that blocked Wu Ming's flames of origin. The net could not withstand the burning of the fire of origin. In an instant, the vines that made up the net were broken and burned to ashes. However, in the next second, new vines would appear to fill in the gaps in the net. Only then was Wu Ming's origin flame blocked. However, upon closer inspection, it wasn't vines that formed the net. Instead, it was pillars of flesh that were covered in eyes. These pillars were the 72 demon god pillars. No, they should be called the 71 demon god pillars now. After all, the concept of Floros was sealed in the Holy Grail by Wu Ming and given to Chaldea for safekeeping. However, even if one of the 72 demon god pillars was missing, it didn't matter. The concept of 72 demon god pillars as a whole could still be maintained. Therefore, these pillars would never be destroyed, and the only way was to get rid of Gidia. Even if Wu Ming's origin flame could burn these pillars of flesh, they were indestructible and could be said to be infinite. The net formed by them was not easy to break through, so there was not much point in continuing like this. As a result, Wu Ming stopped spewing fire. "You have always been so impatient, origin dragon." It was unknown what had happened to Gaia, but she was calmer than before. Her strength had also increased. Just the fact that his command blocked Wu Ming's attack was enough to prove this. If Gidia in the past was a stray hyena in the wilderness, then Gidia was now a lone tiger in the forest. "Looks like you really obtained something from the black origin soil." Wu Ming's huge dragon eyes flashed with an expression of, "As expected." "Actually, it's all thanks to you." Gidia was still sitting on his jade throne, looking rather calm. "I originally wanted to detonate all the black origin soil I summoned to blow you to smithereens, but I didn't expect the power to affect me as well." Sure enough, Gidia was the same as Wu Ming at that time, heavily injured by the black origin soil. However, the damage caused by the black origin soil became a catalyst for me, allowing me to successfully obtain the power of the origin. After Gidia finished speaking, a huge amount of magic power rushed out of Gidia's body. This magic power contained a large amount of origin power, which was exactly the same as Wu Ming's. So what? At best, Gidia stood at the same height as Wu Ming. In other words, Wu Ming was the orthodox, while Gidia was the heretic. However, Gidia did not care about Wu Ming's disdain. Instead, he changed the topic. "Do you know why I wanted to burn human reason?" Wu Ming naturally did not know. Humans are ugly, cruel, bloodthirsty, and full of evil. Gidia began to criticize humans. Although there are excellent and kind humans, it is undeniable that most humans are pests on this planet. They are trash, a danger that must be eliminated. Gidia was a little agitated. He even stood up and spread his hands. "I want to destroy humans, destroy human history, destroy the proof and records of human existence, and destroy these existences that make me feel disgusted." If that was the case, it was obvious that Gidia had done it. Human history had been burned. If it was not for the influence of Chaldea's magnetic field, humans would have gone extinct. However, this planet will give birth to humans again no matter what. This was something that could not be violated. This was something that would inevitably happen. At most, the next batch of humans and this batch of humans would have some differences, but they would be the same in essence. They would be ugly, cruel, and bloodthirsty. Therefore, I want to use the entire human history that I have burned as fuel to help me return to the past, reshape the species that ruled this planet, and change everything from the root. This was the truth of the burning of human reason. Wu Ming snorted at this. Are you trying to say that you're great? Wu Ming had encountered quite a few of these self-righteous fellows. Shiro Amakusa Shurjin was one of them. They only thought that humans needed to be saved and changed, so they began to act. They did not care about the sacrifices that would be made in the process, or how many people would be sacrificed. It could only be said that these people had good intentions, but their methods were wrong. No one could dictate the fate of others. Not humans, not gods, not Gidea, not Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming also knew that these people could not be changed with mere words. Only fists could stop them. As for how to change their minds, that was not something that Wu Ming could care about. In any case, Wu Ming was not prepared to let them live. Gidea had already grasped the black soil and obtained the power of the origin. Any existence with the black soil would view Wu Ming as a mortal enemy. Wu Ming did not know if Gidea could be saved in this situation. As such, there was only one answer left, and that was to completely kill them. At the same time, Gidea was thinking the same thing. This was because Gidea knew about the existence of the origin. Chapter 1041. Gidea was powerless to change all of this, which was why he wanted to burn human principles, and use the energy obtained from burning human principles as a driving force to help Gidea return to the past and reshape humanity from its roots. Unexpectedly, Gidea obtained the black origin soil and also unexpectedly grasped the power of origin. If he could control the origin, it would be much more reliable than going back to the past to change humanity from its roots. In addition, the existence of the black origin soil would have an indelible hostility towards Wu Ming, so Gidea could take advantage of the situation to get rid of Wu Ming and replace him to take control of the origin. And Gidea also had the same idea. Therefore, after Gaia had obtained the power of origin, it did not allow the mantras to recover. Gaia still retained the energy of the mantras after being burned, because it wanted to use it as a weapon to destroy Wu Ming's weapon. Ha 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 ha, great? That's my duty. I'm not great. Gaia laughed. I am the product of the collective consciousness of the 72 demon god pillars. I am the evil of humanity standing on the opposite side of humanity. I am the number one beast I who holds the principle of compassion. I am Gidea who burns human principles. Demon god King Gidea. Behind Gidea's jade throne, the demon god pillars gradually wrapped around it. Countless demon god pillars first withered like dehydration, then intertwined like the roots of an old tree, and finally formed a huge sphere that slowly rose. In the middle of the sphere, a red light appeared. It was filled with a huge amount of magic power, and this magic power was accompanied by a lot of origin power. Seeing this, Wu Ming felt a little uneasy. My duty is to burn human principles and reshape humanity. Everything I do is for this planet, for the world, and you will also become my fuel to help me reach the origin and save all the worlds. Along with Gidea's bold words, the red light in the middle of the tree behind Gidea suddenly expanded, and a purple ray that was magnified several times erupted at Wu Ming. Shoo! The sound of light shuttling between worlds was extremely ear-piercing. This light contained the power of origin, enough to destroy Wu Ming, and completely enveloped Wu Ming. Not long after, the light gradually weakened until it dissipated. The huge tree ball also entered a charging standby state. The ray that penetrated Wu Ming and shot into the distance also exploded, causing the entire world to shake. Many worlds were affected. In fact, a few transparent spheres that happened to be in the path of the light directly disappeared. At Wu Ming's original position, the spherical light film covered Wu Ming's body, preventing Wu Ming from suffering any damage. This was the defense created by Wu Ming's armor of debate, and it needed to be powered by origin energy, so the barrier was covered in origin energy. Only origin power could fight against origin power, this was the law. Therefore, Gidia was only standing at the same height as Wuming. However, Gidia's move was enough to surprise Wuming. Gaia's technique destroyed several transparent spheres of light, each of which was a world. Even ordinary humans had differences in strength. Even if Wuming and Gidia stood at the same height, there were still differences. Judging from the attack just now, Gaia's offensive prowess had surpassed Wuming's. This guy can't be underestimated. Although Wuming didn't have the intention to underestimate Gidia, he was even more cautious now. However, Wuming didn't believe that Gidia's attack didn't have any limitations. That was the energy produced by the humanity that you burned, right? And since it was energy, there would be a time when it would be exhausted. One had to know that humanity only lasted for a few thousand years and wasn't endless. I don't have nearly endless magic power like you. Only by using the ashes of humanity that I'm going to use as fuel can I be confident in killing you. Even the Magus King Solomon didn't have endless magic power, so it was even more impossible for Gidia to have it. That was why he needed to use the energy obtained from burning humanity as fuel to fight against Wuming, who had nearly unlimited magic power. I have to say, Gidia, you are the strongest enemy I've ever faced. Wuming had encountered many powerful enemies, and they also had existences that could kill Wuming. However, they couldn't kill Wuming as easily as Gidia because they didn't have the origin power. Gidia, on the other hand, had the origin power and the origin black mud that countered Wuming. He could easily eliminate Wuming, provided that his attack hit its target. My dream was achieved by stepping on the corpse of your origin dragon. Accept your fate. Wang! The huge tree ball behind Gidia was fully charged. The red light appeared once again and began to gather a huge amount of magic power with the origin power. It was obvious that Gidia was going to use the same move again. However, Wuming wouldn't give him another chance. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you curses. Evil people can't hit me. With the origin power, Wuming's figure suddenly disappeared and instantly appeared in front of Gidia. In the next second, a pure white dragon claw reached out and slashed at Gidia with unstoppable force. Indeed, Gidia had the origin power and could easily kill Wuming. On the other hand, Wuming, who also had the origin power, could easily kill Gidia. It was like both sides had max attack power but only 1 HP. The moment one's killing move hit the other, victory would be decided instantly. However, Gidia's attack range was too large. Once Wuming got close to Gidia, his attack would be restricted. After all, Gidia couldn't possibly fit himself into the purple light cannon's attack range. Gidia didn't want to take him down with himself. Therefore, Wuming chose to get close. Wuming's dragon claw landed on the jade seat and immediately shattered it. Countless demon god pillars danced wildly and surrounded Wuming. As for Gaia, she flew to the side. Afterwards, Gidia gathered energy in his hands. The black mud mixed with tremendous magic power was shot out from Gidia's hands, shooting at the huge Wuming. Light immediately shone from Wuming's body. The huge origin dragon disappeared, replaced by Wuming's human form with the blade of salvation in hand. Wuming easily dodged Gidia's attack. Using the light produced by the dragon transformation as a cover, he continued to use the power of the phoenix to charge at Gidia. Swish! Gidia dodged in advance and slashed with the blade of salvation, only cutting off a corner of the burning branch above Gidia's head. Immediately, the broken branch that separated from Gidia's head was like a leaf that had been injected with sulfuric acid. It decayed and turned black until it shattered and disappeared. A large number of demon god pillars took advantage of the situation and surrounded Wuming, twisting in a spiral and forming huge pillars. And Wuming was entangled in these twisting huge pillars. However, in the next second, sword light suddenly appeared and the huge pillar was directly cut in the middle. Wuming's figure turned into a streak of light and reappeared in front of Gidia. Afterwards, before Gidia could react, he raised his blade. Pa! Chapter 1042. Wuming's divine blade of salvation slashed down, but it did not cut anything because Gidia caught the white blade with both hands and clamped Wuming's divine blade of salvation with both hands. Gidia maintained his posture of clamping Wuming's divine blade of salvation with both hands and spoke leisurely. Sure enough, you're the expert in close combat. What a joke. Wuming's skills from Skaha were not for playing with monkeys, but for killing enemies. Let's not talk about other things first. Even a sword master who only practiced one sword skill all year round could defeat a king who had led an army and had good martial arts skills. Gidia was Solomon's magic form. How could he beat Wuming in close combat? Wuming smiled at this. If you're not convinced? In an instant, Wuming held the divine blade of salvation with both hands and skillfully slid it out of Gidia's hands. Then accept your death obediently. The divine blade of salvation that slid out of Gidia's hands slashed down at Gidia from below. Shing! The black demon god's flesh pillar that blocked Gidia in time was cut in half. Gidia, on the other hand, retreated backward. In the next second, Gidia's humanoid cannon that he had long prepared was instantly launched. The purple ray once again engulfed Wuming's figure, who did not have time to activate the phoenix incarnation. However, immediately after, the spirit of speech that contained the power of origin came out of the purple light pillar. I am the strongest and the one who holds all victory in my hands. Whether it's human or demon, I'm the one who defeats all enemies' hostility. I will defeat any enemy who stands in my way. Puff! Like a fish rushing out of the sea, a burly golden giant rushed out of the purple light pillar. The burly giant seemed to be corroded, and its body was full of holes and incomplete. However, Wuming, who was in the middle of the giant's shadow, was unharmed. The purple ray of the humanoid cannon dissipated, and the aftermath of the explosion still erupted somewhere between the worlds. Needless to say, a few worlds must have been destroyed this time. Wuming dispelled the giant incarnation and stood opposite Gidia, who was floating in the void not far away. Around them were squirming pillars of various colors with eyes. From Wuming's close attack on Gidia to Wuming's use of the giant avatar as a shield to escape the beam of the humanoid cannon, it only took a few seconds. The victory and defeat that had almost been decided was actually just a facade. However, in the end, Wuming still had the upper hand. After all, Wuming had cut off a corner of Gidia's head, while Gidia did not cause any injuries to Wuming. Origin Dragon, you are indeed very powerful, but you still haven't reached that height. It seemed that Gidia had not only obtained origin power from the black origin mud, but also some information about the Origin Dragon. Even if I haven't reached that height, it's more than enough to deal with you. Wuming stretched his neck and brandished the divine blade of salvation. The previous fight with Gidia was actually a test. Wuming did not have many moves, except for close combat martial arts and the divine blade of salvation. Magic and magic were barely enough to resist Gidia's humanoid cannon, but other than that, Wuming still had 12 avatars. By seizing the authority of multiple gods and adapting to Wuming's own authority, the 12 avatars of the 12 authority, God's Killer, were quite powerful. Each avatar of the authority was not weaker than the authority of the other Godslayers, and it was considered a first-class move in other worlds. Now, not to mention using all 12 avatars at once, using multiple avatars at once was a piece of cake for the current Wuming. This could be considered one of Wuming's trump cards. Gidia was obviously not as good as Wuming in close combat. The reason why he dared to attack Wuming even after knowing Wuming's identity and strength was entirely because of the black origin mud and the origin power that Gidia had obtained from it. The test is over. Let's officially begin. Wuming raised the divine blade of salvation, and at the tip of the sword, the light of the sun shone in this cosmic-like world. Wuming was ready for a big wave. However, Gidia seemed to have a stroke and laughed for some reason. Ha! Ha ha ha! Ha 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 dash! Wuming ignored Gidia's laughter and instantly condensed a sun at the tip of the divine blade of salvation. However, at this moment, the demon god pillar beside Gidia wriggled, and then something was presented in front of Gidia by the demon god pillar as if it was presenting a treasure. It was a building wrapped in a transparent ball of light, and it was still snowing heavily inside, as if it was a Christmas crystal ball. However, Wu-Ming recognized this thing. This was Chaldea, a human security organization located on a snowy mountain a few thousand meters above sea level. It was also where Gadotsi, Matthew, Roman, and Olga Marie were currently located. I see. Wu-Ming directly dispersed the sun at the tip of the sword. When you transformed your jade throne into a small world and left the world of the type moon, did you bring Chaldea with you? Did Flawless help you locate it? After all, Chaldea was considered a singularity that was difficult to find after being burned by the Anthropocene. Gydia wouldn't be able to find it so easily, and the Origin Black Mud and Origin Power weren't omnipotent. That's right. It was the moment Flawless escaped from your seal. He sent me Chaldea's location. But there's something I need to say. Gydia took the Chaldea crystal ball with one hand. Long before you entered the Mesopotamia singularity, I had already done this. In other words, whether it was Gadotsi and Wu-Ming smoothly arriving in Mesopotamia or successfully solving the problem of the Mesopotamia singularity, it was all under Gydia's control. So, it seemed that the reason why Chaldea was able to reverse locate Gydia's lair was actually because of Gydia's instructions? At this moment, Wu-Ming couldn't help but frown. Gydia taking this out now not only meant that he had been going easy on Wu-Ming, but in a sense he was also threatening Wu-Ming. Because Gydia saw Wu-Ming's concern. You really cherish these worlds. That's right, Wu-Ming cherished the worlds between the worlds, or rather, he didn't want them to be hurt. The reason why Wu-Ming fought in close combat and didn't give Gydia a chance to fire the light cannon was entirely because Wu-Ming was afraid that Gydia's light cannon would affect other worlds. Wu-Ming knew many people in many worlds, including many friends and family members. After Wu-Ming saw that Gydia's humanoid cannon had the ability to destroy worlds, Wu-Ming chose to fight in close combat with Gydia. Because Wu-Ming didn't want these worlds to be destroyed, he didn't want his friends and family to be in danger. Moreover, although Wu-Ming wasn't overly compassionate, and in a sense, Wu-Ming was an evil person, even he didn't want to see the worlds with living creatures destroyed by Gydia's humanoid cannon. Whether it was the former or the latter, they were all reasons why Wu-Ming wanted to stop Gydia from firing the humanoid cannon. Wu-Ming was worried that Gydia would see through this, so he tried his best to hide his intention. He made the first move before Gydia fired the second humanoid cannon, which could be considered as an act of striking first to gain the upper hand. However, who would have thought that Wu-Ming's intention would be seen through by Gydia? Chapter 1043. Are you trying to threaten me? Wu-Ming went straight to the point. No matter what, Gaia was still a respectable figure. How could she do something so despicable as to threaten him? However, Gaia was kind enough to explain the situation. Why would I? I'm just telling you that Chaldea is under my protection. You don't have to worry about Chaldea being affected by our battle. Then, Gydia put away Chaldea's crystal ball as if he was really thinking about Wu-Ming. However, Wu-Ming didn't relax at all. Firstly, Chaldea was still in Gydia's hands. What it said just now was another kind of threat. Secondly, other than the worlds that Wu-Ming was unfamiliar with, there were many worlds that Wu-Ming cared about that were still in between. In other words, once Gydia's artificial cannon was activated, there was a chance that it would affect those worlds. And Gydia said this because he wanted to get information from Wu-Ming. In short, Gydia's artificial cannon had to be stopped. Otherwise, he would have to take it all on and not let the aftermath of the artificial cannon affect those worlds. All evildoers, be afraid of my power. I am the strongest, and I hold all victory in my hands. I will deny the sky, deny the earth. Make a pact with me. Listen to my call, and obey my command. Thou hast violated the contract and brought evil to the world. Bestow the torrential flood upon me. Let out a dazzling radiance and grant me divine power. Evildoers can't hit me. Wu-Ming chanted the words of the 8 incarnations in one breath. Moreover, he condensed the 8 words into one sentence, forming a short version of each incarnation's spirit. Although it sounded a little out of place, the effect wasn't bad at all. A huge dark purple draconic shadow appeared around Wu Ming. A huge white and pure black divine blade of salvation appeared in the hands of the huge draconic shadow. Black clouds appeared above the huge draconic shadow and kept spreading to the surroundings. In this cosmic-like place, there was a storm, lightning, and thunder, and the seawater had already surrounded the entire Temple of Time. This is a new world. Gidia was surprised. Dark clouds covered the sky, and the sea surged under Gidia's feet. There was no end to the clouds and no end to the sea. The storm with lightning and thunder fell suddenly, and the sea surged violently, crashing into the Temple of Time. Gidia could sense that his Temple of Time and the demon god pillars had arrived in a new world. Without a doubt, this was a new world created by Wu Ming's spirit of speech. This way, we won't have to worry about affecting the worlds in between. As soon as Wu Ming's words reached Gidia's ears, Wu Ming appeared in front of Gidia with the divine blade of salvation in his hand. The huge sword shadow of the divine blade of salvation slashed down at Gidia. Clang! Gidia blocked the attack. Gidia crossed his hands and clenched them into fists, and the sword shadow of the divine blade of salvation slashed at his fists. Upon closer inspection, it wasn't the fist that blocked Wu Ming's attack, but the ring on Gidia's finger. Although Gidia was a 3-meter-tall humanoid creature, his body was very different from a human's body. For example, Gidia's hands were enough to crush several people's heads at once. The 10 rings on his thick hands looked like brass knuckles. However, no matter how much they looked like brass knuckles, they were still just rings. Crack! Sure enough, there was a crack in one of the rings. Humph! Gidia suddenly exerted force and pushed Wu Ming's body away. As for the cracked ring on Gaia's finger, it shattered in an instant. Wu Ming, who knew Roman's identity, easily guessed what the 10 rings on Gidia's finger were. The broken one is a fake, right? Wu Ming wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he slowly chatted with Gidia. Gidia, who was suddenly attacked, wasn't angry. He followed Wu Ming's words and replied, "My king had 10 rings, but he only left 9 rings. One of them was missing, so I made one myself." The king that Gidia mentioned was King Solomon. As for the fake ring that Gaia had created, it was the one that had shattered earlier. But that's not important. We don't need a king anymore. I'm our king. In an instant, the man-made cannon that was already prepared at the back of the Jade Throne was launched. And the target was Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming didn't dodge this time, because if he did, this temporary world that was hard to form would be destroyed by the cannon. Boom! Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! Thunder rumbled. Lightning flashed. Thunder rumbled. Waves surged. Wind howled. Thunder, rain, and waves rushed toward the cannon that was fired at Wu Ming as if they were alive. The moment they came into contact, the thunder, rain, and waves were dyed with a layer of black destructive power. The two collided in an instant. A huge explosion occurred in this world. White light illuminated this world that only had sea and storm. Wu Ming had returned to the route without anyone noticing. On the central platform, Wu Ming landed in his human form. "Lord Wu Ming, why are you back?" After listening to Tiamat's explanation, Enkidu, who was still enjoying the pillow on his lap, instantly got up and came to Wu Ming's side. Tiamat didn't stop him. Instead, she sat aside obediently and didn't disturb him. "There's a problem. I had my clone stall Gidia for a while." That's right. The clone that was fighting Gidia was Wu Ming's full strength. At that time, Wu Ming had used the simple spiritual language formed by the 8 clones: Dragon Seed, Giant, Storm, Annihilation, Flood, Thunder God, Phoenix. Dependence. The ability of the Dependence clone was that when a clone was created, the clone would inherit 100% of the original strength. In other words, the clone could still use the 12 powers. Wu Ming had also given the Divine Blade of Salvation to the clone. The Divine Blade of Salvation, which couldn't be duplicated, could be considered as a cover for the clone. The Thunder God clone, the Storm clone, the Storm clone, and the flood clone, combined with the power of the root, formed a simple and crude world. After that, Wu Ming used the phoenix to escape from this world. At the same time, he had the clone use the phoenix clone to ambush Gidia. Even Gidia wouldn't be able to tell that it was a clone that was fighting it. The reason Wu Ming didn't fight Gidia was mainly because it wasn't easy. Gaia not only hijacked Chaldea, but its artificial cannons can also destroy the worlds between the worlds at any time and anywhere. Victory or defeat aside, there would be heavy casualties in the end. That was why Wu Ming had his doppelganger fight Gaia for the time being, delaying as much as possible. That was why his doppelganger and Gaia had talked about the ring. Unfortunately, Gaia did not give the clones a chance to chat. After chatting for a while, she once again launched a sneak attack on Silence clones with the human logic cannon, and the battle began again. As for why Wu Ming wanted to return to the root, it was naturally to solve the current situation that was getting worse. Chapter 1044. Gidia had the humanoid cannon, and with its origin power it could destroy any world in between with a single shot. Not only that, but it also had Chaldea as a hostage. If Wu Ming fought with Gidia for real, Wu Ming would definitely have some reservations. Therefore, Wu Ming returned to the origin and prepared to explore the secret of the origin dragon's adulthood. Only by reaching that height would Wu Ming be able to effortlessly deal with Gidia, save Chaldea, and protect the various worlds. At that time, Wu Ming might also find a way to restore the worlds destroyed by Gidia's humanoid cannon. But how would Wu Ming find out the secret of adulthood? As mentioned before, it would take time since he had no clue. But now, Wu Ming had a clue, which was why he escaped and returned to the origin. Gidia was injured by the black origin mud and obtained origin power from it. Wu Ming looked at Enkidu and suddenly said, "So, I want to give it a try." As soon as he said that, Enkidu was shocked and his expression changed. Lord Wu Ming? Enkidu had been by Wu Ming's side for a long time, so he basically knew all of Wu Ming's secrets. There was not much that he did not know. Therefore, Enkidu knew very well how harmful the black origin mud was to Wu Ming. Most importantly, almost all of the black origin mud that wandered between worlds had been used by Gidia as bombs. There were so many of them that their power was unimaginable. Otherwise, Wu Ming would not have chosen to leave his body and transfer his consciousness to the backup machine. Since the black origin mud between worlds had been summoned by Gidia and caused an explosion, there was no more black origin mud between worlds. Only some worlds still had black origin mud. After wandering around for a long time, the origin black mud accidentally entered these worlds. Wu Ming had encountered black origin soil in quite a few worlds. The main body of Erica that Darius used was Pandora's box, which contained the origin black soil. When Wu Ming was fighting against the last king, Roman, in the Godslayer world, he had accidentally shattered the world barrier. If he had not stopped in time, the origin black soil surrounding the Godslayer world might have entered the Godslayer world. The black origin soil also existed in the Star Cup, and it had even given the Star Cup its own consciousness. The origin black mud had once existed in the root of the origin, and had almost stolen Wu Ming's home after Wu Ming's return. Although the origin black mud in the box court world was brought in by Wu Ming, it had also affected that world, and Azedakaha had changed a lot because of it. In the Mesopotamia singularity, Tiamat had also fused with the origin black mud for some reason. Her authority, the Sea of Life, had also fused with the origin black mud, and Tiamat had also become extremely strange and powerful. However, after all that had been said, one thing was very clear, and that was that the origin black mud had all been eliminated. There was very little black origin mud in Pandora's box, and after being sealed for so many years, it had weakened. After fusing with Wu Ming, it had luckily been eliminated by the immature Wu Ming. The origin black mud that had almost entered the Godslayer world must have been eliminated in the explosion caused by Gidia. The origin black mud in the Star Cup had fused with the Star Cup's consciousness, and was finally eliminated by Wu Ming. The origin black mud in the Big Origin had also been eliminated by Wu Ming using the power of the Big Origin. In the box court world, the origin black mud had entered Azedakaha's body, and was eliminated by Wu Ming in the end. Even Azedakaha's soul had perished, and his body had been transformed into an absolute evil spirit base by Wuming. As for Tiamat, Wuming had also used the Void Star Taisui seal on Azedakaha's body to bring her to the Big Origin to be purified. In the end, Wuming even had a mother? In any case, all of this meant that the origin black mud that Wuming had encountered or known about had all been eliminated, and not a trace was left. There was no origin black mud between worlds. Only in some worlds there might be some origin black mud mixed in, but Wuming did not have the time to look for it. Therefore, Enkidu's meaning was very clear. Not to mention the secret of using the origin black mud to trigger adulthood, there was not even a shadow of the origin black mud. But in the next second, Wuming took out a ball of origin black mud. The ball of origin black mud, which had shrunk into a ball, appeared in Wuming's hand as if it was afraid. It was as smooth and round as a black jade ball, and those who did not know would have thought it was a precious jade. "Lord Wuming, where did you get this?" Enkidu looked at Wuming in confusion and surprise. Kalas answered Enkidu. "When Master was fighting with Gaia, he took the opportunity to take some." That's right. When Wuming destroyed Gidea's jade throne, Gidea used the origin black mud to attack Wuming when he dodged, and Wuming grabbed a handful at that time. In fact, when Wuming first heard that Gidea obtained his power from the origin black mud, he had planned to get some origin black mud from Gidea for research. After all, who knew if Wuming would destroy Gidea in the end? To be safe, Wuming collected some origin black mud in advance and planned to test it out after killing Gidea. However, who would have thought that Gidea would add the threat of holding Chaldea hostage to the threat of the Anthropocene cannon? With no other choice, Wuming, who changed his tactics at the last minute, chose to escape and let his doppelganger deal with Gidea, while Wuming brought the origin black mud back to the origin to try and see if he could obtain the secret of coming of age. This idea was a little uncertain, but Wuming was uncertain. As an old gambler, Wuming was also gambling. Wuming was not sure if the origin black mud could help Wuming obtain the secret of coming of age, so Wuming gambled on the good side and came back to try. Wuming had also been severely injured by the origin black mud together with Gidea, but Wuming managed to separate his mind from his body in time and went to the backup machine, so he did not know if the origin black mud had any effect on Wuming's growth. However, the reason why Wuming's body grew so quickly was probably not entirely because he stayed in the box garden world for a long time. The passage of time could indeed have an effect on the growth of the origin dragon, but the number of years needed was astronomical. Therefore, it was very likely that the origin black mud did have a promoting effect on Wuming's growth. It was a pity that Wuming had shifted his mind back then and did not experience the secrets brought by the origin black mud. Nor did he know the changes the origin black mud had on Wuming's body. Thinking about it carefully, Wuming increasingly felt that the reason he was approaching the level of coming of age so quickly was very likely because he was severely injured by the origin black mud back then. Now, Wuming did not know whether to laugh or cry. If Wuming's mind had not shifted to the backup machine back then, he might have beaten Gidea up by now. However, Wuming didn't regret it. After all, if the events of a certain time in the past were to change, then everything that Wuming experienced in the future would probably be completely different. Wuming cherished all the people and things that he had encountered so far. So regret? That was impossible. Although the origin black mud was indeed terrifying to Wuming, when he thought about the people and things that he had encountered so far, Wuming suddenly felt that the origin black mud was actually not that scary. Looking at the origin black mud floating in his hand, Wuming immediately made up his mind. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.